Your project isn't worth listening to. Everyone else thinks so too, right?
Alyssa sneered at me, seeking agreement from the others. Everyone kept their heads down, not one person dared to speak up. Alyssa, making such disruptive comments during the meeting is.
Why should I, the daughter of CEO, have to work under a high school dropout? I'm superior in every way.
Alyssa, I understand you're upset, but please follow the instructions for now. When I raised my voice slightly to admonish her, Alyssa glared at me sharply.
I don't want to take orders from you. Why did Dad even hire someone as undereducated as you? If I were in charge, I'd fire you immediately. Alyssa is the only daughter of our company's CEO, Mr. Nelson.
I imagine myself in the future bowing obsequiously to Alyssa, who strides around the office with arrogant behavior.
A chill runs down my spine. I was at my limit, both mentally and physically.
A few days later, unable to face going to work, I resigned.
But little did I know, this was the beginning of my grand turnaround. My name is Kevin, and I've been appointed as the manager starting today. While I'm honored to receive such an important role, I'm also acutely aware of the heavy responsibilities it entails. I will continue to work hard for the company's growth. Thank you all for your support. I bowed my head vigorously.
Applause and congratulatory words poured in from my colleagues.
Keep up the good work. Thank you, Eric.
I'll continue to rely on your guidance. Eric, the department head who had looked after me since I joined, patted me on the shoulder, and I bowed my head again.
My name is Kevin. I'm 23 years old.
I've been working at Owen, a stationery manufacturer, for about 7 years now.
My highest level of education is middle school.
I was attending high school, but when my previously healthy father fell ill, he became so weak that daily life became a struggle. With my mother unable to support both the household and my father's care on her own, I dropped out of high school and joined this company to help with the family finances. It was unusual for someone with my background to be hired, and it seemed to be a first for the company.
But I was taken in thanks to Mr. Nelson's kindness and have been working here since.
I passed the promotion exam that Eric encouraged me to take and was able to become a manager.
I had always felt fortunate to have joined this company. Until recently. Ha! A high school dropout as a manager? That's hilarious. Having to work under an uneducated boss is the worst. Amidst the celebratory mood, one woman muttered venomously. Her name is Alyssa. She is the only daughter of our CEO, Mr. Nelson.
After graduating from college, she worked at another company but joined her father's company just last month. Mr. Nelson, her father, is a man I greatly respect, but his daughter.
I'm going to inherit this company, so you'd better respect me. My word is law.
She says such things without hesitation and is regarded as quite the troublemaker in our department.
But the fact is, as the CEO's daughter, regular employees can't easily speak out against her.
Only those in high-ranking positions have the authority to admonish her, and they are few and far between. Ever since she was assigned to this department and I honestly answered I only finished middle school when she asked about my education.
Alyssa has been mocking me relentlessly.
Alyssa, please refrain from using such language. As everyone knows, our company doesn't judge people based on their education.
Kevin's promotion is a result of his own hard work. Let's all strive to do our best. Eric admonished Alyssa while also standing up for me. Alyssa sat down with a scowl, clearly displeased with Eric's reprimand. Kevin, I know it's tough, but hang in there. I'll support you as much as I can. Eric whispered to me.
While I was happy about the promotion, the thought of dealing with Alyssa gave me a headache, to be honest. A few months had passed since my promotion to manager, but I was still struggling to manage Alyssa, who was one of my subordinates. Her work had always been inconsistent, but since I became manager, her erratic behavior had worsened. With everyone else busy with their own tasks, I ended up taking responsibility for Alyssa's work, which was becoming increasingly difficult. When I reported this to Eric, he would reprimand her, and things would improve temporarily, but then they would quickly revert back. No matter what I said, she would mock my education and ignore my instructions. I continued to drag my weary body through each day, exhausted by these constant battles.
That day, we had a project meeting.
I was participating as both the facilitator and the project proposer. Keeping Alyssa, who sat with a pout, in the corner of my eye, I proceeded with the meeting. When it was my turn, I began explaining my project. The pencil case I designed for schoolchildren uses the latest shock-absorbing material. The overall response seemed positive as I finished my explanation. Just as I was about to hand over to the next presenter, Alyssa's voice cut through the room.
It looks like something a child would design. Alyssa.
I tried to admonish her, but she cut me off.
Typical of someone with only a middle school education to come up with this.
There's no way this will sell. She laughed derisively and threw the project proposal onto the table.
Having a meeting run by someone like him is a waste of everyone's time. Don't you all agree? She sought agreement from the room, but no one responded.
No one wanted to risk defending me and facing her wrath, so there was no support for me. Alyssa interpreted the silence as agreement and continued to insult me.
See, everyone feels the same. Nobody wants to listen to someone less educated than themselves. Really, you should just quit already. The meeting eventually ended with Alyssa's tirade and criticisms. Back in the office, Alyssa ignored the tasks I assigned her. Lately, I've been experiencing daily stomachaches and headaches. At home, I lacked the energy to do anything, merely going through the motions of sleeping and waking. Even my sleep was restless, frequently interrupted. Despite pushing myself to work every day for the company's sake, the breaking point came suddenly. My body won't move. One morning, I tried to get up but couldn't move at all.
My mind was filled with the thought I have to get up, but I couldn't think clearly. I managed to think I need to go to work, but then a wave of breathlessness hit me. Tears flowed uncontrollably. I hadn't realized I had long since passed my limit. When I didn't show up after the start of work hours, Eric called, concerned, and I ended up taking the day off. As soon as taking a day off was confirmed, my symptoms eased. When I explained my condition to Eric, he insisted, "Go see a doctor immediately," his voice serious. It seemed excessive, but even I realized that morning's condition was abnormal. The next day, I went to the hospital and was diagnosed with depression. Just thinking about work the next day triggered heart palpitations and shortness of breath.
I guess this means I can't do this anymore. If thinking about work put me in such a state, I couldn't function properly. There was no option but to quit. Eric arranged for my final farewell to be during a time when Alyssa was out of the office. Just her absence made me feel a bit better. I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help.
No, Eric, you've been incredibly supportive ever since I joined.
I'm deeply grateful for everything you've done for me. Thank you so much.
Eric, looking apologetic, nodded as I expressed my gratitude. Though he seemed pained by my words, he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said,
"If you ever feel like working again, try visiting this place. It's a referral from Mr. Nelson. This is the last bit of help Mr. Nelson and I can offer you, and I'm sorry it isn't more, but I wish you all the best." He saw me off with a smile. Seeing his smile, a flood of emotions welled up, and tears streamed down my face. I bowed deeply one last time and left the company. More than half a year passed, and with my doctor's approval, I contacted the company Mr. Nelson had referred me to and scheduled an interview. The company's name was Sakura Stationery. Like Owen, it was a stationery manufacturer, but much smaller in scale. Seeing it in person, it looked like a small stationery shop in town. I pressed the intercom, feeling a mix of nerves. Yes? Who is it?
The voice sounded young, almost childlike.
I'm Kevin. I called the other day. I have an interview scheduled for today. Oh, right, I remember now, the voice responded.
After a brief wait, the door opened.
Standing there wasn't a woman but a young girl, probably in elementary school.
This way, please. Ignoring my confusion, the girl led me inside. After showing me to a seat, she placed a glass of cold tea on the table.
Thank you, very much.
They should be back soon, so please wait here. She spoke without expression, then moved to a corner of the room where she sat down.
I took a sip of the tea to calm my nerves and looked around the room.
The office was small but tidy, with 2 desks for office work.
I was in an area presumably set up for visitors.
In the corner where the girl sat, I saw a school bag, study materials, and toys. She must be a child of one of the employees. As I watched her play alone, I saw her frowning at a puzzle piece.
Is the puzzle difficult?
She seemed surprised at being spoken to but answered honestly.
Yeah, it's a bit hard. May I take a look? She nodded, so I walked over to her.
On the table was a partially completed map of Japan.
I did that when I was a kid too. That's Kagawa Prefecture, right? It's tough because the pieces are so small. Yeah. Mister, do you know where this goes?
Being called Mr. made me freeze for a moment, but I supposed I did look like an adult to a kid.
Feeling a bit shocked, I helped her find where the piece fit. Here it is.
It goes here. She placed the piece where I pointed.
I see. Kagawa Prefecture is in Shikoku, right? Are you studying a map of Japan?
No, not yet at school, but I sometimes do it here. She continued looking for the next piece.
I found myself staying, watching over her.
I answered her occasional questions and watched as she completed the puzzle.
I finished it for the first time. Well done.
I clapped for the excited girl, and she smiled shyly in return. As we exchanged short conversations and played games like cards and table tennis, we gradually warmed up to each other.
Ah. You're out, mister. That's my point. Wow. That was close. Just as we were getting excited, the door opened and a woman walked in. She was very beautiful. You two seemed to be having fun. Oh, Mom. Welcome back.
The girl ran to the woman with the racket still in hand. Upon closer inspection, their faces were quite similar, making it clear they were mother and daughter.
Thank you for playing with her,
the woman said, bowing her head politely. No, thank you for letting me use your things.
Not at all. It's no problem. Are you here for the interview today by any chance?
Her words reminded me of why I was there. I quickly put on the jacket I had taken off to move more comfortably and introduced myself hastily.
I'm sorry.
I'm Kevin, who called the other day.
Thank you for taking the time to see me today. Ah, I thought so. I'm sorry I had to step out for a bit and kept you waiting. I'm Ashley, the president. This is my daughter, Natalie. Natalie. Say hello.
Urged by her mother, Natalie bowed politely.
I'm Natalie. Thank you for playing with me, mister. Natalie? Thank you too. Will you play with me again? As I pondered how to respond, Ashley gently admonished, Natalie, don't bother Kevin. Sorry, Kevin. No, it's fine. Ashley then asked Natalie to wait quietly and guided me to a sofa for visitors. Now, let's start the interview. Yes, thank you.
During the interview, I talked about my previous work experience, the jobs I had handled, and without going into too much detail, explained that I had left my previous job due to illness but was now looking for a new position as my condition had improved. I also mentioned that my former boss had referred me here. Given that it was in the same industry and the referral came from someone Ashley knew, my hiring was decided on the spot. As the conversation wrapped up, Natalie approached us. Mister, are you going to work at my mom's company? Yes, it's all set now. I'm looking forward to working with you, Natalie. Then we can play together again. Hey! Kevin is here to work. I'm sorry, Kevin. It seems Natalie has really taken a liking to you. Ashley looked a bit troubled but also amused by her daughter's enthusiasm. Their warm interaction filled my heart with a gentle warmth. No, I enjoyed playing with Natalie too. I'll be happy to play with you anytime.
Yay!
Natalie beamed, a stark contrast to her earlier expressionless demeanor.
Ashley's smile as she watched Natalie was so kind and warm, I couldn't help but be captivated. Sakura Stationery was a tiny company, with just this main office and a small factory a bit further away handling production. This setup had remained unchanged since its founding.
However, recent years had been tough on the business, and they were struggling. Sakura Stationery's main products were similar to those of larger companies, focusing on office supplies. They had once tried to branch into school supplies, but it hadn't gone well. So they returned to their original focus and were just managing to maintain their current status.
In the fiercely competitive field, without any long-lasting bestsellers, Sakura Stationery was in a very challenging position.
If that's the case, we should look for a new approach to break through.
Ashley had a stern look on her face at my words.
That's true, but after our previous failure, the staff is quite hesitant.
I can't seem to get any support. If only I had a solid idea.
I have some connections from my previous job with products aimed at children.
If you'd like, we can go and talk to them together sometime.
Really?
That would be great. Thank you so much. Ashley's face brightened at my offer.
I started to think about how I could use the knowledge, skills, and connections I gained from my previous job to benefit Sakura Stationery.
One idea from Sakura Stationery's past caught my attention.
It was a grip designed to help kids with weak hand strength hold pencils more easily. While it's a common product now, back then it didn't gain much traction and was discontinued within 6 months. Seeing the materials on that product sparked an idea for me.
My father had also struggled to hold everyday items when he was sick.
In his case, he couldn't hold a pen, making it impossible for him to work.
I thought there might be many people who face similar challenges due to illness or other reasons. Maybe I could combine my experience with Sakura Stationery's history to create something useful. Ashley, how about developing stationery for people with disabilities?
Saying that, I share the idea that came to mind. Although major companies have already developed similar products, I write down various ways to develop something even better. Actually, we have connections with a paper supplier who is very particular about quality. And our factory manager, John, is an ink enthusiast and does a lot of personal research.
We might come up with something good if we focus on developing notebooks. We nodded in agreement.
Thus, we began working on new product development at Sakura Stationery. Although neither of us had connections in the welfare industry, we were fortunate to have employees with family members in the field who offered their support. Starting from scratch was extremely challenging, and progress was slow, but the entire company was energized and motivated by the new endeavor.
Time flew by as everyone at Sakura Stationery was busy with the new project.
6 months had passed since I started working there. That day, Ashley was out meeting with a supplier to discuss the new product. I stayed behind, working in the office and spending time with Natalie after she returned from school. The wind was strong, and leaves were swirling outside the window. It looks like there's a lot of leaves in front of the office. I'll go clean them up.
Okay. Saying that, I grabbed a broom and dustpan and went outside. Wow, it's cold. The wind's gotten really chilly. The deepening autumn brought a biting chill to the air.
I quickly closed the door to keep the cold wind out and started sweeping up the leaves. As I did, I heard a familiar voice from across the street.
A rush of uneasy emotions surged through me.
Oh? You? Seeing who it was, I couldn't avoid her. I greeted her reluctantly.
Alyssa, it's been a while.
It was Alyssa, the one who had mocked me incessantly, walking with a few people who seemed to be her subordinates.
So, I wondered what happened to you after you quit our company. She glanced at Sakura Stationery and laughed. This tiny company looks like it could go under any moment. Well, I guess it's a perfect fit for someone with your level of education. She mocked both my educational background and Sakura Stationery.
Alyssa, you're as rude as ever.
Oomph. Who cares what a high school dropout thinks?
Her attitude was as unbearable as always, but she continued proudly.
Oh, by the way, I got promoted.
What took you 7 years, I accomplished in just 1. I was just visiting a client who specifically requested me.
Well, congratulations. I replied, not really caring but offering polite words nonetheless. However, I couldn't believe the next words out of Alyssa's mouth.
My idea for the super shock absorbing pencil case is going to be produced, and I was recognized for that achievement.
Wait a minute, wasn't that the idea I presented at the project meeting?
Back then, Alyssa had mocked it as cheap and childish. But everything she was proudly explaining now matched my proposal exactly.
I couldn't help but blurt out. That was my idea.
The people standing behind Alyssa, who seemed to be her subordinates, exchanged puzzled looks. It appeared they had joined her team after I had left and knew nothing of that project meeting.
What? What are you talking about? Of course, I came up with it all by myself. Alyssa snapped at my remark. Her reaction only confirmed my suspicion. I proposed that pencil case. This is my project. If you make such baseless claims, I'll sue you. Alyssa's angry voice cut me off, echoing around us. Hearing the commotion, Natalie stepped outside. What's all this noise? Why are you causing a scene in front of our company, old lady? Alyssa was around my age, but to Natalie, she must have seemed like an old lady. An old lady. Alyssa looked surprised and shocked by Natalie's words, with an expression that's hard to describe. I couldn't help but find it amusing, but I kept that thought to myself. What's with this kid? How rude. Call her parents. I need to give them a piece of my mind. Alyssa tried to storm into the company, but her subordinates held her back desperately. Which mouth is saying that? You were saying pretty rude things to Kevin too. Natalie muttered under her breath, making me nod in agreement. Even some of Alyssa's subordinates whispered, that's true. Alyssa's anger only grew more intense. Lady, if you keep causing a scene, someone will call the police. Look, people are starting to gather. Natalie pointed out, making Alyssa glance around and realize the situation. Well, let's go, everyone. She hurriedly led her subordinates away. Natalie and I apologized to the people around us, saying, sorry for the trouble. The neighbors expressed sympathy, saying things like, must have been tough dealing with someone like that, to which I responded with a wry smile. At that moment, Ashley poked her head out from the company door. Natalie, Kevin, what happened? I heard some loud voices when I came in through the back door. As I hesitated on how to explain, Natalie casually headed back inside. Just some random lady causing a fuss. Anyway, did you bring us any souvenirs? No souvenirs. I was out for work. Ah, you're so stingy. Their typical mother-daughter banter filled the air. I realized that the rough feelings stirred up by my encounter with Alyssa had completely vanished. It's thanks to Ashley and Natalie. I murmured to myself as Ashley called out from inside. Kevin. Natalie's having a snack, so let's take a break together. Hurry up, mister, or I'll eat it all. Wait. I'll be right there, save some for me. I found myself feeling at ease and comfortable spending time with Ashley and Natalie. The suffocating and painful feelings from before were completely gone. I was genuinely glad to have come to this company and met these two. Despite the unexpected encounter with Alyssa, we managed to bring the first new product from Sakura Stationery to market, the Solara Notebook, designed for easy writing for everyone. Thanks to the cooperation from various people. Products that are easy for everyone to use, from children to adults, have created a buzz among those who struggle with conventional products. The response has been better than we expected. Thanks to the Solara Notebook, Sakura Stationery's business improved. And we even began discussing the development of a second line of stationery in collaboration with local welfare-related manufacturers. One day, after work, as I was getting ready to leave, Ashley approached me. Kevin, thank you for your hard work today. Thank you, Ashley. You too. Ever since you joined us, everything has been going so well. I can't thank you enough. Her sudden words made me feel a warm flush. It's nothing. I'm glad I can be of help. I haven't repaid the favor of being taken in yet, so I'll keep working hard. I appreciate your dedication, but please don't overwork yourself. I worry about your health, both Natalie and I do. Thank you. Ashley's kindness made me feel genuinely grateful. Since joining the company, my health had improved so much that even my doctor was surprised. Kevin, may I ask about your previous job? While I had mentioned my former job and the reasons for leaving during the interview, I had kept the details vague. I decided it was time to share everything with Ashley, my middle school education, how Mr. Nelson had given me a chance, and how Alyssa's cruel behavior had led to my mental and physical breakdown, causing me to resign. Kevin, you've been through so much. I'm so glad you're healthy and with us now. Ashley said, her voice filled with compassion. Her kind words made me feel emotional, and I almost started crying. At the same time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was a relief to have finally shared my story and to be accepted for who I was now. Thank you.
I managed to say, my voice filled with gratitude. When I looked up, Ashley was smiling gently.
Would you like to hear my story? I nodded quietly, realizing I knew little about her personal life. Ashley's story was much more challenging than I had imagined.
After graduating, Ashley married the man she had dated during college and was living a happy married life. Then, she found out she was pregnant.
That baby was Natalie. Ashley was overjoyed with her pregnancy and shared the news with her husband. However, her husband did not share her joy. Soon after, he distanced himself from her and their home. Shortly after she announced her pregnancy, her husband asked for a divorce. Despite discussions involving both families, he remained firm. And the divorce went through.
Heartbroken, Ashley moved back with her parents and gave birth to and raised Natalie. However, further hardships befell Ashley. Around the time Natalie turned 1 year old, her parents were in an accident and suddenly passed away. With an infant to care for, Ashley was devastated but decided to take over Sakura Stationery, which her parents had left behind. Despite opposition from relatives, she declared she would protect what her parents had cherished and, with the support of those around her, she continued running the company as a single mother for the past 7 years.
Ashley's face held its usual gentle smile as she finished her story. I thought about how I would have handled her situation. If I were in her shoes, I doubted I could have recovered. But Ashley in front of me is smiling.
She stands on her own feet, pours her love into her daughter, Natalie, and continues to support the company alongside the people around her.
I couldn't help but wish to be a support for her too. Kevin, you've already been a great support to us.
Ashley said, almost as if reading my thoughts, which made my heart skip a beat. She smiled warmly at me. Kevin, thank you for joining our company and spending time with us.
We're truly grateful. I'm grateful too. I tried to respond, but the words didn't come out right. Being alone in the office at night, with Ashley so close, I felt my nerves about to explode. Suddenly, the back door swung open. Whoa! I screamed in surprise. Mister, you're so loud.
It's nighttime, be quiet.
Natalie said as she walked in, her voice exasperated. Natalie, you should be at home.
Ashley scolded her. Their house was right behind the company, just a 30-second walk away. Still, Ashley was naturally concerned about her child walking around alone at night.
Sorry, I came to fetch you since it was getting late, but I guess I interrupted something. Natalie said, grinning and looking back and forth between Ashley and me. Natalie! Don't say such things. We were just talking. This time, Ashley is flustered.
I nod my head vigorously in agreement. I would never admit that for a fleeting moment, the thought of hugging Ashley had crossed my mind.
Watching our reactions with amusement, Natalie delivered the finishing blow. You two should just get married.
Her words made both Ashley and me turn bright red.
Natalie! Really? Kevin, I'm sorry. No, don't worry about it. I should get going anyway. Good night. Without waiting for their response, I grabbed my things and left the office.
As I hurried home, my mind was filled with fantasies of Ashley, Natalie, and me living happily together. Thanks to the success of the Solara notebook, Sakura Stationery achieved its highest sales ever. Everyone in the company celebrated this great achievement together. With the improved business performance, we could allocate more budget for future development and even expand our staff.
Everyone, including myself, was enjoying fulfilling days. Then one day, I heard some commotion coming from outside. A moment later, someone burst into the office. Where's Kevin? Get him out here now. It was Alyssa, her face twisted in anger. I asked everyone to step back and approached her. What do you want? I asked as calmly as I could, trying not to provoke her. You told my dad something, didn't you? Confess now. Alyssa demanded, though I had no idea what she was talking about. It had to be you. Otherwise, why would I suddenly be suspended? Suspended. Did Mr. Nelson say that to you? Yes. He said it was because of that project. It has to be because of you. Undo it right now. She shouted, and I struggled to think of a way to get her out of the office before she caused any harm. Suddenly, Ashley stepped forward, placing herself between Alyssa and me. Ashley. Kevin has done nothing wrong. Stop making false accusations. Ashley said firmly, confronting Alyssa. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. This is my company, and Kevin is a valued employee.
You, on the other hand, are an outsider.
Leave immediately. Ashley's words redirected Alyssa's fury towards her. An old lady like you as president? No wonder this company is so pathetic. Once I take over my dad's company, I'll crush this bottom of the barrel business. Saying that, she laughs heartily. I couldn't believe she could say such things while under suspension. Concerned about Ashley's safety,
I tried to persuade her to stay with everyone else.
However, Ashley shook her head. It's okay. I think. Almost as if on cue, the front door opened again. Alyssa. What do you think you're doing? Apologize to them immediately. Dad.
It was Mr. Nelson, the man who had hired me despite my lack of formal education.
Ashley.
I am deeply sorry for the trouble my daughter has caused.
Alyssa, apologize now. Why should I apologize to this woman? Enough. Mr. Nelson's reprimand was stern, but Alyssa's face showed she had no intention of apologizing.
Mr. Nelson, I think it might help if you explained the situation to your daughter.
Ashley suggested, seeing the need for clarification. I, too, looked to Mr. Nelson for answers. Alyssa.
I've told you many times, but Ashley here is the daughter of Mr. Owen's sister, our founder's sister.
She's also one of our company's major shareholders. No way. Both Alyssa and I were taken aback by this revelation. Ashley gave me an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, Kevin.
I didn't mean to keep it from you, there just wasn't a good time to bring it up.
No, it's fine. I'm just surprised.
Ashley explained further that her late mother was the sister of Mr. Owen, the founder of my previous company.
Owen.
Ashley had inherited shares from her mother when she passed away. Mr. Nelson was not a blood relative but had been chosen as the successor due to his capabilities and had taken over as CEO after Mr. Owen retired.
In other words, Owen is not a company structured to be inherited by family members. That is also true. I've never heard this before. I've told you many times. You just weren't listening. So I can't inherit the company. Alyssa's face turned pale. Mr. Nelson sighed deeply, then turned to Ashley. I truly apologize.
I will make sure my daughter formally apologizes as well.
Mr. Nelson, I am more interested in hearing about what you discovered. How did that go?
At this point, the direction of the conversation changed again. I couldn't keep up at all and could only look back and forth between Ashley and Mr. Nelson.
Yes.
As you mentioned, we found that the project Alyssa claimed as hers was originally Kevin's.
After investigating both the company computers and Alyssa's personal computer, we found identical proposals and testimonies from the meeting members. You looked into it? I asked, surprised. After hearing from Ashley, we found undeniable evidence. During this process,
we also uncovered numerous instances of Alyssa's abusive behavior and poor work attitude. It was disheartening to see my daughter's misconduct.
Mr. Nelson said, glaring at Alyssa, who was trembling.
Leaving his daughter to her fate, he turned back to me and bowed deeply. Kevin, I am deeply sorry for the pain my daughter's actions have caused you, both physically and mentally, and for her theft of your idea. I promise to make her atone for her actions. He then turned to his daughter.
Alyssa, bow your head and apologize, he commanded. They both apologized together. Mr. Nelson, please, you don't have to bow.
Honestly, there were times I couldn't forgive what happened, but since working here,
I've forgotten about the past. Just ensure no one else goes through the same experience, and that's enough for me.
It was not Mr. Nelson, but his daughter who quickly reacted to my words.
See, he's fine with it. So can we drop this now? Be quiet. Mr. Nelson's shout echoed.
I appreciate Kevin's kindness, but what happened cannot be forgiven.
Your lack of remorse is clear. I've been too lenient with you. Alyssa. You're fired, effective immediately. This is a joke, right? Dad. I promise you too that she will never come near you again. I am deeply sorry.
Finally, Mr. Nelson bowed deeply once more, then left, practically dragging his daughter who was crying and fussing with her face all scrunched up. Later, I heard through the grapevine that Alyssa was working part-time at one of Owen's affiliated stores. As a part-timer, she couldn't act high and mighty and had to keep her head down. True to Mr. Nelson's word, she never appeared in front of us again, and the stormy incident came to a peaceful end,
bringing back tranquility to Sakura Stationery and our lives.
The day after Mr. Nelson's apology, he reached out to see if I would return to the company, but I chose to stay at Sakura Stationery.
I reported this to Ashley. She looked anxious and asked, "Are you sure you won't regret it? If you want to go back, I want to work here."
I interrupted Ashley, firmly stating my decision. Ashley smiled with relief at my words.
"Kevin, thank you." We gazed at each other. "When are you going to marry my mom?" Natalie had slipped into the conversation unnoticed, causing both Ashley and me to choke. "Natalie. Come on, it's obvious to everyone at the company.
Just get married already and be my dad. I don't want anyone else, but I'd be okay with you."
Mr. Marrying Ashley, with Natalie's approval. Could this once fantasy become reality?
I glanced at Ashley, who was blushing furiously and looking down.
"I'd be very happy with you, Kevin," she muttered shyly. Hearing this, my face grew hot. Mom and Mr. are as red as boiled lobsters. "Natalie! Natalie!" Ashley and I shouted in unison. Then all three of us burst into laughter. That moment was filled with unmistakable happiness.
In my 20-some years of life, I had faced two major hardships. The first was the change in circumstances due to my father's illness. The second was the onset of depression caused by work stress. During those times, I felt I was standing on the edge of despair. But each time, there were people around me who reached out to help.
Mr. Nelson, Eric, Ashley, and Natalie.
Thanks to them, I was able to recover. I am deeply grateful to them, more than words can express. I wonder if someday, I too can become someone who helps others, just like they helped me. To be ready for that day, I will continue striving to become a person like them.
Slacking off here? Do you really want to get fired? After a tough job search, what awaited me at the company that finally hired me was
Jessica, the beautiful daughter of the company president, and her cold gaze. "If you can't do the job, come with me." With the company on the verge of bankruptcy, I was taken to a certain place.
There, I got involved in a certain incident. I remember the face of the culprit.
To help Jessica in her time of need, I used my special skills.
Little did I know that it would change our relationship.
Never expected that the cold Jessica would suddenly change her attitude and get closer to me.
"Hey, can you stay with me tonight?" "That's not right. I've told you the same thing before, haven't I?"
Senior employee Lisa pointed out mistakes in my documents, and I humbly bowed my head.
"I'm sorry. I'll fix it right away. Honestly, I didn't even know what was wrong."
In such cases, it's best to admit fault and apologize immediately. But she saw right through that too.
"Chris, you think just apologizing is enough, don't you?" "I'm sorry. See? That's why you can't do the job. Listen carefully this time. This is how you should write it." Lisa's bluntness is one of her defining traits.
Once, she even called me useless right to my face.
But I actually appreciate her bluntness. It's better than being suddenly abandoned one day, without any warning. My name is Chris, and I'm 25 years old. Currently, I'm working as a clerk at a small travel agency called Anderson Travel.
I started working here 2 months and 13 days ago. A travel agency is a completely different world from my previous job.
Yet, here I am. Because I was so desperate back then. "Chris, why did you choose our company?" What do you think are your strengths and weaknesses?" Strengths. I'm sorry, I don't know." That's enough. My job search was always like this. I've always been bad at communication, which led to me failing interviews at dozens of companies. In the end, the only company that hired me was Anderson Travel.
I couldn't afford to be picky, so I applied to every job I could find, and ended up in a travel agency.
But as soon as I joined, I faced the threat of unemployment again.
As they hired someone like you, maybe I should start preparing to jump ship too.
Jump ship? Job hunting.
It's a race to see if the company will go bankrupt first or if all the employees will leave first.
Either way, this company's days are numbered. You really have no luck getting hired by a place like this. With a laugh, Lisa opened a job search website on the company's computer. No luck.
Returning to my desk, I thought, she might be right.
The company I barely managed to get hired by was already chronically in the red. It was no secret in the office that bankruptcy could happen any day.
We used to run a lot of TV commercials.
I remember seeing them. But now, there's not much left to see.
Apparently, Mr. Anderson, the president of this company, has given up
and isn't involved in the management at all anymore. In the afternoon,
as I happened to walk down the hallway, I heard the voices of the employees again. It's a well-known fact that this company is on the brink of collapse.
So no one holds back, openly discussing the company's internal issues. So, who's running the company now?
Just as they exchanged glances, it happened.
Who authorized an extended lunch break?
A sharp, commanding voice echoed through the hallway.
The employees all jumped in shock.
The owner of the voice, walking towards them with the click of heels, was,
"State your department and name. This will be noted for the next round of layoffs." The person speaking with such a cold expression was someone everyone knew.
Her large eyes and small face, along with her petite frame, made her look cute like an idol,
popular among the male employees.
But her personality was cold and arrogant. Indeed, she was infamous for being heartless. She was Jessica, the only daughter of Mr. Anderson,
and the next president of this company, at 28 years old. You all just need to do your jobs. There's no need to think about who's running the company. Or are you suggesting that I can't handle the job in place of Mr. Anderson? No, not at all. It's fine, say it clearly. Just like you were gossiping so energetically earlier. Go on. Ah. Jessica peered down at them with an expressionless glare. That was enough to make the employees scream and run away.
Only Jessica and I, who had nothing to do with it, were left behind.
So, are you slacking off too? Department and name?
Her large eyes turned towards me, and I, already weak in unexpected situations, looked down, flustered.
Seeing this, Jessica sighed. Just kidding. You're Chris from the clerical department, right? What?
I don't know about my father, but I believe it's essential to know every employee's face and name.
To determine if they are useful to the company or not, too. Judging from your reaction, you won't understand unless I say it clearly. You belong to the latter category.
I knew of Jessica's reputation, but this was the first time we spoke face to face. She was even more blunt than I imagined, and even more so than my mentor, Lisa.
She spoke without changing her expression, completely emotionless. If you can't do the job, there's no reason to keep you in the company. Ha! Not understanding her words immediately, I stared directly at Jessica. She met my gaze head on and said firmly, "You're coming with me tomorrow." The next day, she drove me in the company car to the mountains 2 counties over.
There stood a small, secluded hot spring inn.
This is a secret hot spring known only to insiders. It's going to be the highlight of the tour we're planning. We'll be staying here tonight. Oh, just so you know, this is strictly a site inspection, part of our work. I chose you because you happened to be in front of me.
Reviewing the hot spring, enjoying a one-night stay with 2 meals, and writing a review.
Surely you can manage that. So don't get the wrong idea.
After giving me a stern look and emphasizing her point,
Jessica walked into the inn without looking back. What are you doing? Hurry up and follow. Oh, yes.
Stunned, I stood there for a moment before hurriedly chasing after her. Then, 2.5 hours later, I sat on a bench in front of the large public bath, waiting for Jessica to come out of the women's bath.
She's late, isn't she? Surely. Let's meet here. Jessica had said before we parted ways to the men's and women's baths, exactly 2.5 hours ago. I had come out of the hot spring about 20 minutes later. That means I'd been waiting for Jessica here for over 2 hours. She said it would take time because she wanted to thoroughly check the quality and temperature of the spring, but 2 hours in that water? Having experienced it myself, I knew the water here was quite hot. I barely managed to stay in for 20 minutes, convincing myself this is work. How could she stay in there for so long? She's amazing, Jessica. No, wait. Could it be? Could she have gotten sick inside and be unable to get out? A bad thought crossed my mind. This is bad. Jessica, are you there? Are you okay? I got as close as I could to the entrance of the women's bath and called inside. But there was no response, and my anxiety grew. Still, I knew that barging into the women's bath would cause a scene. That's it, I'll go get someone, just wait a minute, Jessica. There should be some female staff at the front desk. Thinking this, I started running down the hallway. At almost the same moment, I heard someone opening the door to the bath behind me. Oh. Thank goodness. Wait, what? I turned around, thinking it must be Jessica, but what I saw was a man coming out through the curtain of the women's bath. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered as he quickly walked past me. And as the man disappeared down the hallway, the door to the women's bath opened again, and finally, Jessica emerged. Chris, have you been waiting here all this time? Oh, yes, we agreed to meet here. I see, well, you can go back to your room now. But what? For some reason, Jessica was glaring at me, keeping a bit of distance, looking quite annoyed. However, I couldn't just say, okay, sure, and leave. Because. Are you okay, Jessica? I'm fine. Nothing's wrong, anywhere. Just go already. But it was obvious to anyone that Jessica was not fine at all. Her skin, from her face to her arms and ankles, was all bright red. Her steps were unsteady, and her eyes couldn't focus. You don't look well. You're probably overheated from staying in the hot spring for so long. It's not like I wanted to stay in there. I had no choice because my underwear. What? Oh, nothing. Anyway, we're done here. Free time until dinner. Jessica. I moved without thinking. As I reached out, Jessica, who had swayed heavily, collapsed into my arms. Hot. The small body I held was burning hot, as if it were on fire. And it was incredibly soft. No, don't touch me, she muttered weakly. This isn't the time for that. We need to cool you down immediately. Can you walk? I can't. Because right now, I'm. Jessica, usually so calm and composed, was mumbling weakly as I half-dragged her to my room. Her usual fitted shirt and skirt seemed to cling to her body more than usual, emphasizing her curves. But I didn't have the luxury to pay attention to that. I was driven by the thought that I had to help her. I cranked up the air conditioning and made her drink lots of water. As she rested, the redness gradually faded from her skin, returning to its usual clear whiteness. Her previously dazed eyes regained their focus. When I leaned in to check on her, Jessica's eyes flew wide open. Ah! No, stay away! Whoa! Startled by her sudden scream, I fell back on my rear. Jessica sprang up from the bed where she had been lying and quickly backed up against the wall. She hugged herself with her arms, as if protecting herself from an enemy. Don't come any closer. Don't look at me, turn around right now. Why? Just do it. I couldn't argue with her fierce tone and turned around as ordered. Then Jessica started mumbling something. It was gone. What? My under? My underwear was gone. When I got out of the bath, it had disappeared from the changing room. What? Reflexively, I turned back despite her order. Our eyes met, and Jessica's face turned bright red again, as if she were overheating. Don't look at me. Just look at the ceiling. Yes, ma'am. That's better. When I looked up at the ceiling, she seemed to relax a bit. She let out a long sigh and finally explained why she had been in the bath for so long.
The water was hotter than I expected, so I decided to get out fairly early.
But then, I realized my underwear was gone from the basket in the changing room. No matter how many times I checked, it was nowhere to be found. So, I couldn't leave, but it was too cold to stay in the changing room. So I kept going back and forth between the bath and the changing room until I started feeling ill. Basically, that's why I'm not wearing any underwear right now. She confessed the shocking truth with a strained voice.
You can look now, your neck must be tired, she said.
Even so,
after hearing her confession, I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Still staring at the ceiling, I asked about something that had been on my mind.
So, when you say your underwear was gone, you mean it was stolen?
I don't know, but there weren't any other guests besides me.
So, it's unlikely someone took it by mistake. I hate to think about it, but there's a possibility that there's an underwear thief in this inn. Jessica muttered bitterly.
Hearing this, a memory suddenly came back into my mind.
Ah. What is it? Well, it was strange to see a man coming out of the women's bath. What do you mean, Chris? Jessica cornered me with questions, so I revealed it.
I told her about the man I saw coming out of the women's bath just before she emerged.
Jessica's eyes widened, and she pressed closer to me. What did that man look like? He must be the underwear thief. Think hard and remember. What did he look like? Even the smallest detail. Please, try to remember.
As she shook my shoulders, I tried to recall the man's face.
I grabbed the pen and notepad on the table and quickly sketched what I remembered. This is what he looked like. The moment I held up the notepad, Jessica gasped. What? She took the notepad with trembling hands and exclaimed in shock. What is this? Chris, I didn't know you could draw so well. Well, it's about the only thing I'm good at. No, it's not just a talent. This is incredible. The wrinkles around his eyes, his teeth, it's like a photo. I had always been good at drawing. Many people had said my drawings were photo-like. But I had my reasons for not taking those words as compliments. And this outfit, isn't that the inn staff uniform? Oh, now that you mention it.
Realizing this, I grabbed the notepad and headed to the front desk to explain the situation. As a result, the culprit who stole Jessica's underwear was identified.
Indeed, it was a male employee of the inn.
He had snuck into the women's bath to commit the theft but couldn't leave because I had been waiting outside the bathhouse. He confessed to the manager that he had been the one stealing underwear repeatedly. The police were called immediately, and the inn became a bit chaotic.
We are truly, deeply sorry. After the male employee was taken away by the police, the inn's president, accompanied by the head of the guest services department, profusely apologized to Jessica.
They also offered to waive the entire cost of our stay as a sign of apology.
And of course, we will provide the best service possible for the rest of your stay. Are you asking us to overlook this? No, that's not our intention. Then, no thank you. Let's go, Chris.
Jessica curtly rejected their offer, looking like she had regained her usual composure.
She walked straight towards the entrance without looking back. I hurriedly followed her, and we left the inn together. Maybe I did something wasteful. We had a chance to stay for free, Jessica murmured while driving down the mountain road.
A slight smile appeared on her face for a moment.
It was the first time I had seen her smile. It's a pity for you too, Chris. The food there is reputed to be delicious. No. I'm glad. Glad? About your legs.
After we left the inn, it seemed like your shaking stopped. When I said that, Jessica's mouth fell open in surprise.
As if she had just realized her legs had been trembling. You really observe things, don't you? With that drawing and all. I have to admit, I'm impressed. Thanks, but it's the only thing I'm good at. Don't say that. With your drawing skills, you could succeed in that field. Why did you decide to work in the travel industry? That's, well, it's a long story. I see. Everyone has their reasons. I used to be lauded as the president's daughter and the future president, but now I'm living in near poverty. Speaking more casually than usual and with a softer expression, Jessica talked a lot. It was a side of her that probably no one at the company knew. And I realized she was deliberately putting on a cheerful facade when we arrived at the hotel in town. "It's late, so let's stay here tonight. Is that okay?" "Understood. I'll check if they have 2 single rooms available." Just as I was about to get out of the car, Jessica suddenly called out to me. "Wait. Huh?
Not singles, a twin room."
A twin room? After everything that happened, I'm still scared. Look, I'm shaking again. So please, Chris. Just for tonight, stay with me."
Her large eyes filled with tears as she looked straight at me.
My heart skipped a beat. And I couldn't refuse her request. "Can you draw me?" Jessica asked as she relaxed a bit on the bed. "Draw you? Is that a problem?" "Not a problem, it's just I'm not good at drawing people." "You're so good at it." "Please, I want to know how I look through your eyes, Chris." "Well, it wasn't that I wasn't good at it, it was more that I didn't want to. Especially if the model was Jessica. My style couldn't capture her charm." "But, all right."
I picked up the notepad from the side table and began to draw. After about 3 minutes, I stopped and handed the notepad to Jessica with a stiff expression.
"Here you are. Wow. Is this me?"
Her eyes sparkled as she stared at the drawing intently. I had drawn her smile from the car.
It was the most memorable expression I had seen that day. But I wasn't satisfied with the piece at all. "That's not my drawing." "Huh? What are you talking about, Chris?" "I just saw you draw it." Jessica tilted her head in confusion.
But her next words hit me hard. "But it's true, this drawing feels different from the one earlier. The one earlier was almost like a photo, but this one feels softer and kinder."
Ah! She had hit the mark.
I had intentionally changed my style, and Jessica had noticed.
"I mimicked someone else's style for this. It's not my drawing. Is it? Maybe this person?" Jessica sat up and took her phone out of her bag. She turned it on and showed me the screen. Displayed on it was, "An artist painted this for us a long time ago. It's my father, my mother, and me as a little girl. Isn't it beautiful?" Yes. I was captivated by the perfection of the painting. The 3 of them, facing each other, laughing joyfully. A moment of family togetherness captured in delicate, intricate watercolors. So soft and gentle that it made anyone who saw it smile. This painting always kept my family together. No matter how bad our fights were, just looking at this painting would bring back gentle feelings.
We faced many crises, but this painting kept us from falling apart. Now, I keep it as my phone's wallpaper. And it comforts me whenever I'm going through tough times.
Chris, the way you drew me looks a lot like the way I'm smiling in this painting. Did you learn to draw from this artist by any chance?" "No, that person never taught me to draw. In fact, I hardly remember talking to him, because he never showed any interest in his own son." Jessica fell silent, shocked. "Your father is?" "Yes. I'm the son of that artist, Robert."
Robert, the watercolor maestro, is known by everyone. He's won numerous prestigious awards internationally, and his paintings often fetch millions.
Such a great man, but
as a father, he was far from great. His delicate, gentle artistic style was the exact opposite of his stern, often harsh demeanor.
He was taciturn and difficult, always frowning and locked away in his studio. He never took care of me, never took me out to play, and I don't even remember him smiling at me.
As a child, I often felt sad, thinking my father loved his paintings more than he loved me.
And yet, in the end, I followed in my father's footsteps. Did you love drawing? I don't know. But I couldn't imagine any other path.
Maybe because I wanted my father to take care of me more than his paintings, I ended up watching him all the time. Naturally, I decided I wanted to draw for a living, and after graduating from art school, I got a job as an illustrator.
But it led to the biggest disappointment of my life. They're just riding on their father's coattails. Such a letdown.
Those words still echo in my mind. In the end, this setback caused me to leave the company, and at the same time, I vowed to myself, I will never draw for work again. My father truly is great. I realized at my previous job that I'd never be able to draw like him, no matter how hard I tried. The best I could do was mimic his style.
We're the same, then. I wanted to be a businessperson like my father.
At some point, Jessica had lain down on the bed, looking at me. In her hands, she held the portrait I had drawn, cradling it carefully.
I wanted to expand the company, be respected by many employees. I always wondered how I could become like my father. One day, he told me that a great businessperson can control their emotions. No matter how happy or sad you are, you shouldn't show it in front of your subordinates. Jessica had followed this advice from her revered father to the letter, to the point where she couldn't genuinely smile anymore. Do you know my nickname? It's the Ice Queen. They say I'm always expressionless, never showing what I'm thinking, and it scares people. Instead of being respected, I'm kept at a distance, and my management isn't going well. I've been so frustrated. I ended up taking it out on everyone around me. I'll never be like my father. She crumpled her face into a bitter smile. Then she held up my drawing. I love your drawing, Chris. It encourages me, makes me feel like I can still smile like this. As she spoke, Jessica changed her expression. She lifted the corners of her mouth and narrowed her eyes, mimicking the smile in the drawing. Her smile was awkward but kind. Do you really see me like this, Chris? My heart started pounding and my face grew hot. Yes. I think you're beautiful. You should smile more often, Jessica. Really? She looked at me with wide eyes, surprised by my answer. That's not really an answer, Jessica said with a soft laugh, her first genuine laugh. But, if you say so, Chris, I'll try. I'll start by smiling more often. This time, she smiled even more naturally. Then she yawned widely and, still smiling, closed her eyes. I'll go to sleep now. Good night, Chris. Yes, good night. I dimmed the lights and lay down on my bed. But that night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's gentle smile. After that night, Jessica began to change. She started smiling more at the office and proactively communicating with the employees. At first, the employees were confused, but they gradually accepted her new, expressive self. A sense of unity grew within the company, with everyone determined to overcome the business crisis together. And there were other changes as well. Chris, did you see? The response this time is amazing. You're our company's savior. Ahaha, thanks. I responded with a wry smile to the praises from those around me. Recently, I had transferred from the administrative department to the advertising department. This was at Jessica's strong recommendation. She had bowed deeply, asking me to save the company from bankruptcy. Chris, your drawings always catch attention. I know what happened at your previous job, but I still want to ask you. Please, this is my plea. With such earnestness, I couldn't refuse. Breaking my vow to never draw for work again, I took on the task of designing the brochure. As a result, Jessica's prediction was spot on. The brochures I designed generated a huge response, especially on social media. This significantly boosted the company's visibility, leading to many inquiries and numerous tour bookings. For the first time since the company began to falter, there were signs of an improvement in the business. Thank you so much, Chris. It's all thanks to you. Jessica, now able to smile naturally, came to the office to express her gratitude. Her bright smile filled me with a warm feeling, a feeling I recognized as happiness. Jessica was happy because of my drawing. Acknowledging this happiness, I also felt a complex mix of emotions. It's not because of me. Ha! Jessica must have realized it too. I was deliberately drawing in my father's style. And another reason for the attention was that the brochure was designed by the son of the famous artist, Robert. You're just copying scenes. That's not what I call art. My father had once criticized my drawing. In essence, he told me I had no talent. And here I was, mimicking my father's style again, thinking, I really am just a second-rate imitation. Without my father's legacy, I wouldn't have been able to make Jessica smile.
The more praise I received, the more I lost confidence as an artist.
Then one day, an unexpected visitor came to see Jessica. "Listen. If our company's designer handles it, it's guaranteed to go viral. Why not give it a try?"
Hearing the voice from outside the reception room, a chill ran down my spine.
No way. Feeling a bad premonition, I couldn't help but press my ear against the door. Then, I heard Jessica's firm voice resonate.
"I've said it many times, but no thank you.
I don't know anyone more talented than him. If he is as excellent as you say, why not use him at your own company?" She was smiling, but I could tell she was definitely angry. Even through the door, I could imagine Jessica's demeanor vividly.
As I hesitated with my hand on the doorknob, the door opened from inside.
"Sorry to bother you when you're busy, Chris. This gentleman says he knows you. Could you confirm?" "Yes." I stepped into the reception room and lifted my gaze. That's when I realized my bad feeling was right. Of course, it's Kevin. "Hey, Chris. It seems like you're doing pretty well. But it's all thanks to your father.
You're still riding on his coattails." The man grinning at me with an obnoxious smile was Kevin, a former colleague from the design company where I worked. He was in the sales department and the one who had cemented my downfall.
Back then, I was struggling with my work. Even though I was hired as an illustrator, every time I was given a task, my boss, Eric, would reject it, and the reason was always my father.
"Your realistic drawings are excellent, but our clients want warmer illustrations. Like your father's, for example."
Yes. Everyone at the office knew that my father was a world-renowned artist.
Even if they didn't say it outright, they all expected me to draw like him. The gentle and warm illustrations, like my father's, which I struggled with.
Those expectations gradually pushed me to the edge.
And Kevin had noticed my struggle.
"Hey, Daddy's boy. Is it true you got the job because of your father's connections?"
From a certain point, Kevin began to persistently pick on me.
Daddy's coattails. A huge disappointment.
The only failure of the great Robert. Every time we crossed paths, he would throw those words at me.
Eventually, I lost confidence in the one thing I thought I was good at, drawing. My spirit broke completely, and I left the company as if running away.
"I saw the brochure, Jessica.
It's just a rip-off of Robert's work.
He's only getting away with it because he's his son, but eventually,
complaints will come in.
You should change the person in charge before that happens. Replace him with someone truly talented.
Not just riding on their father's fame." Kevin was always good at hitting where it hurt.
My father, who was indifferent to his child but strict about art.
He must be furious right now, knowing that I've been imitating his style without permission. I started feeling that way.
I worried that I was causing trouble for Jessica, who was working hard to protect the company.
He might be right. "Chris?" As I lowered my gaze,
Kevin, anticipating this moment, spread his documents on the table.
"Here are some designers I highly recommend. They do honest work." "And?" Kevin eagerly introduced his company's designers. But Jessica interrupted him. "No, thank you. I have no intention of changing the person in charge." "What? You think his drawings are plagiarized? What exactly are you looking at to make that judgment? You must be blind." "What?" Kevin's face turned red with anger as he jumped up from the sofa. However, Jessica stood up before I could react.
She grabbed the brochure from beside her and thrust it in front of Kevin's face. "This is a combination of Chris's realistic illustrations and the techniques he learned from Robert.
In other words, it's a piece only Chris can create.
We welcome any complaints, even from Robert himself, because I will give the same explanation.
So,
there's no need for your unnecessary concerns."
Jessica.
Her bold declaration blew away the anxiety that had been clouding my heart. I wasn't just a second-rate version of my father, I was creating something only I could.
And more than anything, I wanted Jessica to recognize that. "You'll regret this.
You'll wish you had cut ties with him later."
With that parting shot,
Kevin stormed out of the reception room, his shoulders bristling with anger.
After the door slammed shut, Jessica looked up at me and smiled brightly. "Don't worry. No matter what happens, I'll protect you, Chris." "Thank you."
It was a somewhat complicated declaration for a man to hear. And a few days later, Kevin made his move. This was delivered to me anonymously this morning,
Jessica said as she handed me the document.
As soon as I read it, I felt a shock that darkened my vision.
Because it was.
The document accused me of having relationships with multiple women simultaneously. It also claimed that Chris was embezzling company funds. These accusations detailed my supposed wrongdoings.
That's not true. I know. I know your character better than anyone.
I also know that these claims are baseless lies, and I have a pretty good idea who sent this.
Kevin. I had the same suspicion as Jessica.
Kevin's aim was not to damage my social standing but to undermine Jessica's trust in me.
I considered keeping this to myself and not telling you. But I couldn't. Why not? Because it made me so angry. It infuriated me to think that you,
who saved this company, were being disrespected by such a despicable person.
Jessica.
Jessica clenched her fists, her voice and expression tinged with anger. At the same time, I saw tears welling up in her eyes, and I knew exactly what I needed to do.
"Let's fight back, Jessica."
"Chris, actually, I was thinking the same."
"But how?" "I have an idea. An eye for an eye."
Jessica tilted her head in confusion at my words.
The next day,
I placed something I had prepared overnight in front of Jessica.
"Is this a photo?"
"If it looks like a photo, then our plan is almost successful.
We should send this photo to Kevin's company." "Wait, this is a drawing?" Jessica's surprise was understandable.
What I had prepared was a drawing that I had painstakingly made to look as close to a photograph as possible. Using all my skills, I created a piece with a level of detail that would fool anyone at a glance. For the first time, I felt grateful for my talent in realistic illustration.
"If we run it through a copier, they won't realize it's a drawing." "Amazing, but the people in this, who seem so close, could it be?" "Yes. Kevin and some female colleagues from our previous company." Unlike Kevin's baseless accusations, this is based on fact.
I simply drew what I saw and remembered.
Hearing this, Jessica gasped. "Oh. I've heard of this before." "Chris, could it be that you have a photographic memory?"
"Yes," I nodded at Jessica's words.
"A photographic memory.
It's the ability to instantly and vividly remember and retain everything seen.
Since I was a child, I had an exceptional memory that astonished adults. I only learned it was called a photographic memory when I was about to enter the workforce. Once I see something, I never forget it.
Even scenes I wasn't particularly interested in, I can recall and draw from memory. The one who had relationships with multiple women at the same time, as depicted here, is Kevin."
Jessica didn't doubt my confident statement for a second.
Following my suggestion, we ran the drawing through a copier, compiled it into a document, and sent it anonymously to the design company where I had previously worked. The results were beyond our expectations. Kevin, who was engaged to the executive's daughter, was questioned by his superiors and ended up confessing to cheating with several female employees. He even confessed to embezzlement, though no one had asked about it,
out of fear that someone knew everything.
"It seems there's someone who knows everything," he muttered in terror, clutching his head.
"Your photographic memory helped you when you saved me at the inn, didn't it?"
After our successful retaliation against Kevin, Jessica spoke with a tone of understanding. She said it was an incredible ability, one too valuable to keep hidden.
"However, What's wrong, Chris?" "Well..." Seeing my uneasy expression, Jessica's face also clouded over.
To her, I revealed another secret I'd been keeping.
I had a mild developmental disorder.
It's often said that people with a photographic memory might have developmental disorders like autism spectrum disorder.
I was one of them.
Since childhood, I had difficulty communicating with others and struggled to keep up with school lessons.
Even after getting a job, I had trouble understanding work instructions. Coupled with the extreme memory from my photographic memory,
I was often seen as an oddball and spent most of my time alone. So, I knew that having a disorder would eventually be found out,
even if I tried to hide it. So at least, I wanted to keep my photographic memory a secret. That's what I thought when I joined this company. And yet, you helped me.
Suddenly, my hands felt warm and I looked up. In front of me, Jessica was holding my hands gently and smiling.
Thank you so much. Your talent saved me, Chris.
Really?
Yes, talent.
A truly remarkable talent. It's because you, Chris, who can use it correctly without flaunting it,
that you were gifted this ability by God. A wonderful talent. I had never thought of it that way.
I had always believed that having a photographic memory meant living a life with more difficulties than others.
I had even come to resent it, seeing it as a burden. But Jessica praised it as a talent. Is it really okay to think of it as a talent? To be proud of it?
Of course.
I fully support you.
Jessica smiled brightly at me, and her figure blurred as tears filled my eyes.
For a while, I couldn't stop crying as she held my hands. After that,
Kevin, who confessed to various misdeeds, had his engagement called off and was fired from the company. Incidentally, I also learned the reason why he had driven me out of the company.
It was jealousy. He was supposed to be in the spotlight as an elite graduate from a prestigious university, but he was annoyed that I, the son of a famous artist, received more attention than he did.
Now, rumors about him have spread throughout the industry, making it extremely difficult for Kevin to find a new job. I continued to be heavily involved in designing the brochures, further increasing the company's visibility. With the hard work of Jessica and my colleagues, the company is now stable and profitable. As a result, Jessica, who had tirelessly protected the company, officially took over as president. Under the leadership of the new, capable president, the company is expected to continue growing. And today, I'm facing a momentous occasion.
It's quite a turnout.
A voice called from behind me, making me turn around. There stood my father, someone I half expected wouldn't come.
Dad, you came. I finished my work for now, he replied gruffly, holding the invitation I had sent him. Today was the day of my first solo exhibition.
Through persistent work, I had gained recognition as an illustrator named Chris, not just as Robert's son.
Finally, I had been invited by an art gallery to hold my own exhibition. It's late, but I'm sorry for imitating your style without permission. Thanks to my father's presence, I was able to confess what had been weighing on my mind. His response was just one word. Good work, Dad. That one word was enough.
In fact, I had already learned from my mother about his true feelings. My father had always struggled with social interactions, and after learning about my developmental disorder, he didn't know how to relate to me and became more withdrawn. He had tried to connect with me through our shared love of drawing but ended up saying things that sounded like he was dismissing my work, which he regretted later. He had even secretly collected all the brochures I had designed in his studio.
This is Chris's own work. I see,
my father murmured to himself as he looked at my drawings. For some reason, his profile looked happy. I felt the long-standing tension between us dissolve.
At that moment, I heard a voice calling my name. Chris.
A woman hurried towards me from a distance. It was Jessica, who had come despite her busy schedule as president.
Sorry for being late. Congratulations. Thank you. Jessica, is everything okay at work? I'll worry about that when I get back.
Jessica's bright smile made me smile as well. When I turned to introduce her to my father,
I was taken aback.
Please take good care of my son,
my father said, bowing deeply to Jessica. Dad. Oh, as a colleague, of course. Yes, I will. Jessica stammered, her face turning red. Jessica? For some reason, her blushing face looked adorably cute. I,
who never forget a single detail once seen, thought for the first time, I want to remember this moment forever.
Years later,
Jessica sometimes looks back with a nostalgic smile. She says that the misunderstanding back then actually helped her muster the courage to confess.
Thanks to your father, I was able to confess to you, Chris.
So, let's continue to take care of each other forever. A gentle smile graced Jessica's face, and the ring I had just given her glistened on her finger.
Smiling back, I replied, likewise,
and held the love of my life in my arms.
You probably didn't finish high school, so you must be stuck in a dead-end job and broke, huh? Showing up at the end of the reunion to dodge the fee is just pathetic.
You don't have to force yourself to join the after party either if you're that strapped for cash.
Just go home soon.
As he threw this insult at me, a former classmate gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder.
Today was our first class reunion in 10 years.
I arrived at the venue just before it ended due to some unforeseen circumstances. A classmate who had always held a grudge against me quickly noticed my lateness and sneered, "You probably don't have the money to pay the fees."
Do you?
I could hear the crude laughter of other classmates behind me. Even though I knew it was pointless to care, the sting of being looked down on boiled inside me, and before I knew it, I was biting my lip hard.
Just then, oh, you have no idea why he was late, do you? Do you even know his reason for coming late?
The speaker was the most beautiful girl in our grade, who had just appeared on the scene.
Thanks to her words, that classmate would soon feel thoroughly embarrassed. Because the truth about me is, I hope I can just make it in time for the after party.
I said this as I ended the phone call I had been on and started running toward the restaurant.
My name is Mike, and I'm 28 years old. Today is the day of my high school reunion.
I was on my way there by train, but due to some trouble along the way, I ended up being late and am now rushing to the venue.
The days in high school.
A time filled with many bitter and painful memories for me. Honestly, I wondered whether I should even attend the reunion, but there was someone I wanted to see, so I decided to go.
Even after 10 years, there's someone I still long to see. Her name is Emma.
She was so beautiful that she was the talk of the school, and I'm pretty sure almost every guy in our class had a crush on her.
I was one of them. Emma was always surrounded by people, lighting up the room with her smile.
On the other hand, I wasn't very outgoing, so I was often alone and got teased by my classmates as being gloomy or a loner.
The only thing I really focused on was studying. My mother always said to me, just make sure you study. It'll help you in life.
So, from a young age, I liked reading and gaining knowledge. Thanks to that, I developed a good study routine, and I enjoyed it enough to get into one of the top high schools in the state. Even in high school, nothing much changed.
I often studied alone in the library.
One day, as I was heading to the library like always, someone called out to me.
It was Emma.
She suddenly approached me and said, "I want you to help me study for the upcoming exams."
Emma was not only beautiful but also always at the top of the class and an amazing athlete, a truly perfect person.
When I hesitated to respond, wondering if I had anything to teach someone like her, Emma stood there with a worried expression,
waiting for my answer.
Seeing her like that, I realized there was no way I could refuse. From that day on, Emma and I started studying together for a few hours after school. Despite being an excellent student, Emma struggled a lot with math.
On the other hand, I wasn't so great at English. Really? In that case, I can help you with English, and you can help me with math, Mike.
Emma said with a bright smile. Her smile warmed my heart. Fortunately, our strengths and weaknesses complemented each other perfectly, so we were able to help each other with the subjects we struggled with.
As we spent more time together, I started to see new sides of Emma that I hadn't known before.
The way she would grimace when she opened her math textbook. How she would pout and sulk when she got stuck on a problem. The way she'd light up with childlike glee when she finally solved a tricky question. And how she couldn't stop talking whenever the subject was her favorite snacks or pop idols. These reactions were so different from the perfect image she usually presented, and I never got tired of watching them. When we studied together, I often found myself just watching her expressions instead of focusing on my work. And the shy smile she'd give when she caught me staring was my absolute favorite.
Mike, thank you so much.
Thanks to your great teaching, I'm starting to find math a little fun.
I think you're exaggerating, but I'm glad to hear that. Honestly, I'm starting to like English a bit more too, thanks to you. So, thank you.
We walked through the school as the sun began to set, chatting after another study session. I loved this time just as much as our study sessions.
The exams are coming up soon. Emma murmured quietly.
It had been over 3 months since we started our one-on-one study sessions, and the exam period was almost here.
Emma's face was clouded with worry, likely nervous about the upcoming tests.
Wanting to cheer her up, I tried to reassure her.
You'll be fine, Emma. I know you'll do great.
But she let out a small sigh at my words.
Mike, that's not what I'm worried about. What?
I couldn't quite grasp what she meant, and I was left puzzled. By then, we had reached the school's entrance. Since we lived in opposite directions, this was where we always parted ways.
Let's have a little celebration after the exams are over. It's a promise, okay?
She said this while holding out her pinky finger.
Is this a pinky promise?
I hadn't done this since I was a kid, let alone with a girl, and my mind started to panic. Seeing my hesitation, Emma urged me, "Come on, hurry up."
Pressured by her, I finally extended my pinky, and we made a pinky promise. Pinky swear. There, now it's a promise.
I stood there, unable to believe what had just happened, with Emma smiling brightly at me.
And then she said, "See you later," and Emma left.
I was in a daze, and both my pinky finger, which had brushed against Emma's, and my face were warm.
At that moment, I was the happiest I'd ever been. It was my first love. Even if I couldn't express my feelings, I hoped these moments would continue. But little did I know that the next day would bring me crashing down.
The next day, during a break, I was on my way back to the classroom after using the restroom.
Hey, Mike. I heard you've been getting pretty close with Emma lately.
I was suddenly called from behind and felt an arm forcefully thrown around my shoulder.
David. I saw you two at the entrance yesterday. Since when did you two get so tight?
The thought that he had seen our interaction made my face burn with embarrassment. Ignoring my obvious discomfort, David continued.
You like Emma, don't you? If that's the case, why don't you go ahead and confess to her? Egged on by David, his group of friends started chanting, "Do it. Just say it." I can't do that.
Even if you're trying to hide it, it's obvious to everyone.
Oh, look who's here, Emma.
David pointed towards Emma, who was walking our way, chatting with her friends.
The moment I saw her, my face felt like it was on fire. Go on, get over there. David, stop. Saying that, David forcefully pushed me from behind. As a result, I was suddenly thrust in front of Emma. She and her friends gasped in surprise. Hey, Emma. Mike here has something to say. A loud shout from behind David's voice.
Hearing it, the students around us turned their attention to see what was happening.
Wait, is this a confession? No way. And to Emma, of all people. The murmurs from the crowd made me want to run away.
But with David and his crew blocking my path, there was no escape.
Come on, say it. Confess now, they egged me on. Desperate to get out of this situation, I forced the words out of my mouth. Emma. I like you. Jeers erupted from the crowd.
When I looked up, I saw Emma's face twisted in pain. She was clenching her fists tightly, her body trembling slightly.
Emma. I'm sorry. I can't. Cutting off my words, Emma shouted and then ran off. Her friends quickly followed after her.
As I stood there, watching her leave in a daze, I could hear the sighs and disdainful whispers around me.
Oh man, he really blew it. Poor Emma, having someone like Mike crush on her.
David approached, a nasty grin on his face.
Did you seriously think you had a chance? What an idiot. You and Emma? That's hilarious.
David and his gang burst into laughter, doubling over as they watched me stand there, stunned.
Oh man, that was priceless.
Watching you get dumped like that totally made my day.
Thanks, man. With that, David and his friends left me behind, still laughing.
The other students around glanced at me with pity before hurrying off as the bell rang, leaving me alone in the hallway. The shock of being rejected made my steps heavy, but I somehow managed to drag myself to the classroom, where I felt everyone's eyes on me.
In the distance, David's group was smirking, clearly enjoying my misery.
Around Emma, a group of girls had gathered, whispering to her, but when they noticed me, a few of them shot me dirty looks. David had likely spread the story of my confession throughout the class, turning it into a joke. I could hear murmurs all around me, but none of the words registered in my mind. Later, when I tried to approach Emma to apologize, her friends formed a tight circle around her, blocking any chance of getting close. I spent the rest of that day with my head down, avoiding everyone. Even after school, things didn't get any better, and I felt too awkward to face Emma, so I skipped going to the library for the first time. And from that day on, I started skipping school more often.
But it wasn't because of Emma.
My mother had fallen ill and was hospitalized. She had raised me on her own after my father passed away when I was a child. But the stress finally caught up with her, and she collapsed. A few months later, my mother passed away. I was taken in by relatives, and though my homeroom teacher suggested I say a final goodbye to my classmates, I was too devastated by my mother's death to do so. And so, I left the town where I had spent my days with my parents. Life after that was hard, and just thinking about that disastrous confession day still makes my chest ache. But the days I spent with Emma in the library, and her smile, have always stayed with me, tucked away in a corner of my heart. She had been the emotional support that kept me going. So when I received the reunion invitation, I couldn't help but want to see her, even if just for a moment. Checking my watch as I ran, I finally reached the hotel where the reunion was being held.
Mike. Is that you? Long time no see.
The first part is almost over, but you should be able to join the after party.
Really? Sorry for being late. Don't worry about it. A lot of people are just coming for the after party anyway. Why don't you sit down and rest for a bit? Everyone will be coming out soon. A classmate working the reception suggested I take a seat.
I gratefully accepted, resting on a nearby chair after my run. A few minutes later, the door to the reunion hall opened, and the sound of lively chatter filled the air.
Well, it's Mike. Showing up at the last minute, huh?
I looked up at the familiar voice, filled with the same old sneering tone.
David. Long time no see. You look pretty worn out. I guess struggling to make ends meet is starting to show on your face.
He grinned at me as he spoke.
Oh, I get it. You're too broke to pay the full fee, so you're trying to sneak into the after party instead, huh? Pathetic. Must be tough being poor.
He tried to put his arm around my shoulder as he said that. Not wanting to get chummy with him, I dodged David's arm.
David's face twisted with irritation, not liking my reaction.
Before long, his old crew started to gather around us. Some of them were unfamiliar faces, likely friends he'd made after I left town.
Hey, David, who's that guy? Did he even go to our school?
David grinned at those words.
Seeing his face, I had a bad feeling. Oh, this guy? This is Mike.
He was with us in freshman year. He was dirt poor, living with just his mom.
Still,
he somehow managed to get into our high school.
But eventually, they couldn't afford it anymore, and he had to drop out, right? Must have been around winter time? I thought he might have frozen to death somewhere, but I guess he made it. But with a high school dropout as your highest education, I bet you're struggling to find work, huh? Working some dead-end job? Maybe construction or something? Man, it must be rough being poor. He laughed loudly, clearly enjoying himself.
Since a lot of what he said was partly true, I didn't bother to argue, but David took my silence as an invitation to continue his insults.
Let me guess, you're here today to see Emma, right? Even after she brutally rejected you back then, you still haven't given up, have you?
She's not here yet, but you know someone like you doesn't stand a chance with a girl like her.
Just back off. A high-class girl like her needs a high-class guy like me. I'm going to win her over. Oh, and hey, why don't you try confessing again? Just like last time? It was hilarious watching you crash and burn.
As David's words brought back memories of that painful day, I felt a bitter sensation welling up in my chest.
David was still laughing.
But what surprised me was the look on the faces of his friends.
Unlike before, they seemed uncomfortable, not joining in with his taunts.
Some were even whispering among themselves, casting sidelong glances at David. Maybe they had grown up, even if David hadn't. But despite this, his laughter grated on my nerves, and I considered leaving. If Emma wasn't here, there was no point in sticking around.
I'm heading out.
I started walking back toward the reception desk.
Wait, you're leaving already?
You just got here.
Come on, stick around for a bit. The classmates working the reception looked surprised as I smiled apologetically.
Sorry, I replied, but before I could go, I heard David's voice from behind me.
Yeah, get out of here. Go home and read some book on how to save money. I'll be sure to send you an invitation to my wedding with Emma. So start saving up now.
I'll invite you as a pity gesture.
When I glanced back, David was grinning, shooing me away like I was some stray dog.
It was clear that everyone around was uncomfortable with his behavior. Just then, a woman's voice cut through the tension from the entrance.
Poor? Who exactly are you calling poor? Everyone turned to see who had spoken.
When David recognized the voice, he let out a shout of delight.
Emma! And then, everyone around us started murmuring.
The appearance of the girl who could be considered the school's Madonna caused everyone to become excited. It had been over 10 years since I last saw Emma, and perhaps because of the makeup she now wore. She looked much more mature, her beauty rivaling that of an actress in a TV show or movie. As I stood frozen, caught between the joy and confusion of finally seeing her again, David quickly moved past me to stand beside her.
Emma! It's so great to see you. It's been 10 years since graduation, and you've become even more beautiful. I've been doing well too, you know.
I graduated from a prestigious university and landed a job at the renowned Gosway Corporation.
I'm about to get promoted soon. I'd love to hear what you've been up to. Why don't we catch up at the after party? Or maybe, we could slip away just the two of us.
David was speaking eagerly, but Emma completely ignored him.
In fact, she seemed to be glaring at him, though only for a moment, before her face lit up at the sight of me. She waved,
her expression brightening like a child's.
Mike!
I was worried I wouldn't get to see you since you were late, but I'm so glad you made it.
Saying that, she ran toward me.
Her smile was as pure and innocent as it had been back then, unchanged from when she was just a young girl.
Emma!
Caught off guard by our unexpected reunion, I fumbled for words, unprepared for this moment.
How embarrassing for a grown man. Hey, Emma! Why are you even bothering with Mike?
David hurriedly interrupted our conversation, clearly flustered.
Emma's expression turned annoyed. Emma, talking to Mike is a waste of time. You know that, right?
All he can talk about are his struggles and some depressing stories from a dead-end job.
I mean, come on. You know he dropped out of high school and never even graduated. What kind of interesting conversation could you possibly have with someone like that? It's a waste of your time. Besides, Mike was just about to leave anyway because he's too broke to stick around, so why don't you and I?
David continued to belittle me right in front of Emma, completely unfazed.
That's enough. Your rude comments are really unpleasant to listen to. Emma snapped back sharply. David stammered, What? What, in confusion? Mike, poor? Did you even bother to ask him what he does for a living now? What's there to ask? I mean, he's a high school dropout. It's obvious what kind of jobs he'd be stuck with, right? At first, David was overwhelmed by Emma's retort, but he regained his confidence by mocking me.
Seeing him leaning back with a smug expression, as if it was only natural, I found him both ridiculous and a little pitiful.
Emma sighed, clearly exasperated. You really don't know anything, do you, David? First of all, Mike didn't drop out, he transferred to another school. And do you even know why he was late to the reunion today? Transferred? Sure, whatever. But let's be honest, he probably went to some lower-level school for poor kids. And as for today's tardiness,
I'm sure he was just trying to skip out on the first event to save money. Typical of a poor guy.
You're embarrassing yourself.
Mike was late because he was helping a pregnant woman who had fallen ill on the train. He was taking care of her as a doctor.
Emma's words sent shockwaves through the crowd, leaving David and everyone else speechless. Emma, that's a good one. I didn't know you had a sense of humor. But come on, Mike being a doctor? That's a bit much, don't you think? Humor? Do you really think I'd joke about something like that?
The woman Mike helped was my sister.
Do you think I'd lie about someone saving the lives of my family?
As she spoke, Emma turned to me and bowed deeply.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Because of you, both my sister and her baby are safe. It was true that I had left our high school during the winter of our freshman year. But that was because my mother had passed away, and I had to move in with relatives in a different town. Our homeroom teacher should have explained everything to everyone, but knowing David, he probably only half listened, made assumptions based on my family situation, and concocted his own version of the story.
I did continue my education at a new school.
Though it was tough adjusting to life without my mother, dealing with a new environment, and living with relatives, I pushed myself to regain a sense of normalcy. Before she passed away, my mother, in front of our relatives and me, expressed her wish, when I'm gone, please use the insurance money for this child's education and living expenses until adulthood. I don't want my situation to limit the path this child chooses. My relatives honored her wish, ensuring that the funds were used for my education.
And then they said, just as your mother wished, go on to further your education and pursue what you want to do. With their support, I set my sights on a single goal.
I wanted to become a doctor, the same kind of doctor who had cared for my mother until the very end, never giving up on her. As a child, I was inspired by the doctors and nurses who tirelessly worked to save lives, and I wanted to help others. But the path to becoming a doctor was incredibly challenging.
Even though I had always liked studying, getting into medical school required an extraordinary amount of effort.
Despite facing setbacks, including repeating a year, I eventually managed to get into a well-known medical school in the country.
But getting accepted wasn't the end of the journey.
After that, every day was filled with relentless effort and constant learning.
There were countless moments when I felt like giving up. It wasn't just about the studying.
I had to work to support myself, too. There were struggles with relationships, and even after I started working at a hospital, the job came with sleepless nights and the constant pressure of the profession. It's a job that takes a toll on both your physical and mental health, with no regard for day or night. As that grueling lifestyle dragged on, there were times when I felt so overwhelmed and sad that I wished I could join my parents. But I held on, motivated by my mother's final wishes, the respect and admiration I had for the doctors who treated her,
and the memories of those few precious moments I spent with Emma. When I imagined meeting her again, I wanted to be someone I could be proud of.
All those years of effort led me to this very day. On my way to the reunion, I was on the train when a pregnant woman came and sat beside me. She wobbled slightly as she took her seat, so I instinctively reached out to steady her. The pregnant woman politely thanked me, saying, "Thank you very much." We exchanged a few words, engaging in small talk. She mentioned that she was on her way back to her hometown to give birth. Her husband was supposed to accompany her, but an unexpected work obligation meant she had to travel alone. Sensing her anxiety, likely due to feeling vulnerable, I said, "It must be difficult to move around with such a large belly.
If there's anything I can help with, please let me know."
She seemed a bit reassured and managed a small smile. But then, things took a sudden turn. The woman sitting beside me suddenly fell ill. I alerted the train staff, and though I did my best to provide first aid in a clean, safe area, the lack of proper medical equipment made the situation feel precarious. We arranged for an ambulance to meet us at the next station, and I stayed by her side, offering comfort.
Just as we were about to arrive,
her water broke. There was no time to lose. While calming the panicked pregnant woman and ensuring her safety, I boarded the ambulance with the waiting paramedics. This was because the woman had pleaded with me, "Please come with me." In her moment of vulnerability, she likely wanted someone who had been by her side, even for just a short while, to stay with her.
I agreed and went with her to the hospital.
Once there, I briefed the waiting doctors on her condition and the emergency care I had provided, then entrusted her to their care.
Just as I was about to leave the hospital, having nothing left to do, I noticed a woman running towards me, out of breath.
"Excuse me. I'm the sister of the pregnant woman who was just brought in. How is she?
Is she okay?"
She directed her questions at the doctor I had been speaking with.
"Ah, you are her sister.
Don't worry, both your sister and the baby are fine. She's with the nurses right now. It's fortunate that she had a doctor on the train with her who knew how to handle the situation." The doctor smiled reassuringly as he spoke.
"Is that so? Thank you very much.
The woman's tense expression softened with relief as she turned to thank the doctor, but then she froze when her eyes met mine.
The same thing happened to me. Emma. Mike. Wait, what's going on?
The pregnant woman I had helped was, by sheer coincidence, Emma's sister. Now that I think about it, she did resemble Emma in some ways.
Mike, you're the one who helped my sister? Thank you, really, thank you so much. It was nothing, really.
As I nervously exchanged awkward words during my long-awaited reunion with Emma, I suddenly heard, "Emma." A group of men and women called her name as they approached us. It seemed that her sister's husband and her parents had also arrived. Emma quickly explained the situation to them, and they all expressed their gratitude to me. I humbly bowed my head as they thanked me, but just then, a nurse came over, looking for the family.
You must be the family.
Please come with me, we need to go over a few things. With that, I figured my role there was done, so I turned to Emma.
Well, I'll get going now. Mike, you're going to the reunion, right?
I'm going to stay with my sister a little longer, but I'll head there afterward.
Would you wait for me until then?
With her request to wait for her, I paused for a moment, considering my options.
In a way, my goal had already been fulfilled.
But seeing the hopeful look in Emma's eyes, I smiled and nodded. Relieved, Emma smiled at me before following the nurse with her family. As she walked away, I remembered the call I had received on the way to the reunion, confirming that both her sister and the baby were in stable condition.
Thank goodness.
I'm so glad both your sister and the baby are okay. What I did was really nothing. So please make sure to thank the doctors who took over.
Emma shook her head.
We've already thanked them, but my sister specifically wanted to thank you. She said that your support on the train gave her the strength to keep going, especially when her water broke. She was terrified. But having you by her side in the ambulance helped her stay calm.
And when she heard your name, she couldn't believe it was you. Neither could I. Honestly.
Yeah, I was just as surprised.
But I'm really glad everything turned out okay. I smiled back at Emma. Emma was also smiling,
though her eyes were slightly red. She had probably cried from the stress and relief of her sister's ordeal. Even though what I did was minimal, knowing that my presence had helped her sister in some small way was all that mattered to me.
Mike, a doctor, and he saved Emma's family?
This can't be real. David, who had been eavesdropping on our conversation, muttered in disbelief, his face pale. David, I know you went to a prestigious university and landed a job at a big company, and maybe you're successful.
But how can you, as a person, think it's okay to spread false stories and mock a classmate who's been through difficult times? Maybe the people around you have let it slide.
But I can't imagine working with, much less dating or marrying, someone who would trample on others' feelings like you do.
To be honest, you're the kind of person I never want to see again. Emma's words were sharp and decisive, rejecting both David's behavior and any affection he had for her. Her resolute demeanor was even more impressive than I remembered from our school days. Our classmates, too, seemed mesmerized by her strength. I could have walked away and let things end there, but if I did, I'd be no different from the person I used to be. Like Emma, I need to find the words to say to David myself. David!
I called out to him as he hung his head. He flinched for a moment, his shoulders tensing, but then David looked up at me with downcast eyes.
Mike, I don't know what misconceptions you had, but everything Emma said is true. I graduated high school and went to university. Now, I'm working at a hospital in the Kansai region.
All of this was possible thanks to my late mother and the support of my relatives. You're free to think whatever you want about me, but please, don't speak ill of my family. I looked David directly in the eyes as I spoke. He bit his lip and lowered his head, unable to respond. I believe my words reached him. As the commotion finally subsided, the people around us began to regain the mood to head to the after-party. The lobby, where the reception was held, started to buzz with activity.
In the bustle, both David and Emma seemed to have disappeared. Having accomplished my goal of seeing Emma, I considered leaving the venue and exploring the city for a bit. Mike. What? Emma.
Before I knew it, Emma was right beside me. Amid the loud chatter all around us, her voice, strangely enough, was the only one that reached my ears clearly. Her face, so close to mine, was as beautiful as ever. Then, she took my hand in hers, holding it tightly with both of her own.
My face immediately grew hot. Do you remember the promise we made back then? About having an after-exam celebration? How about we have one now, just the two of us? You remembered that? Emma smiled shyly at my surprised reaction.
Faced with the enchanting invitation from someone I had admired for so long, I couldn't bring myself to refuse.
I nodded in agreement.
Together, we slipped out of the crowd and found our way to a quiet bar. I'm glad we found such a nice place.
Yeah, it's perfect. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. After a few moments of silence and sipping our drinks, Emma asked a question out of the blue. Hey, Mike. You're not married, are you? I mean, you're kind and a doctor. You must be popular, right? Popular? Me? No one had ever said anything like that to me before, and I was so taken aback that I quickly denied it. No, not at all. I'm not married, and I don't even have a girlfriend.
The head nurse, Nancy, who's been looking out for me since I was a rookie,
keeps telling me, you should find a nice girl soon. But I've never really been, popular.
My friends and colleagues often share their wedding news, and most people my age at the hospital are already married. As for me, I'm still single, and I often get asked by older colleagues, don't you have anyone special, with concern in their voices.
But what about you, Emma? Do you have a husband or partner?
If so, I'd love to meet him.
I'm sure anyone you chose would be wonderful.
I managed to keep a smile on my face, but as I said those words, a pang of sadness hit me. The thought of Emma with someone else, a person who's probably everything I'm not, was almost too much to bear.
But to my surprise, Emma's expression turned into a pout, and she seemed upset. Emma. Why are you so dense? You haven't changed at all since back then. She downed the rest of her drink in one gulp. Wait, don't drink it all at once. Mike. Yes?
Hearing her call my name so sharply, I instinctively straightened up.
Was it the alcohol?
When I looked at Emma's face, I noticed her cheeks were flushed. Her eyes, slightly teary, gazed up at me, and the moment our eyes met, my heart skipped a beat.
I've actually liked you since back then.
The words slipped from her lips, and I could hardly believe my ears.
What? But, back then.
I recalled the painful memory of that day. The day I confessed my feelings under pressure from David and his gang, only to be rejected so bluntly.
That rejection had been etched in my memory ever since. Hadn't that been just as awful for her as it had been for me?
Seeing my confusion, Emma slowly shook her head.
When you confessed to me that day, I was actually really happy. I felt the same way, and knowing you liked me too made me so glad.
But at the same time, I got scared. I was afraid that if we became more than friends, we'd lose the comfortable relationship we had in the library. The thought of that terrified me, and before I knew it, I'd shouted no.
So that's what happened. The fear of changing a familiar and comforting relationship into something unknown. I might not have understood it back then, but I could grasp it now. I was so immature then, only thinking about myself.
I didn't consider how my response would hurt you. After some time passed and I calmed down, I realized how cruel I had been, and I wanted to apologize. But then you had to deal with your mom's passing.
And I didn't get the chance to see you much anymore. As more time went by, it became harder and harder to say anything, and eventually, what I feared most became reality. We drifted apart, and I regretted it so much. After that day, our after-school study sessions came to an end. With my own struggles, I started skipping school more often, and the chances to see her dwindled. I didn't have the courage to talk about it, and so, I ended up transferring to another school. Without saying anything to Emma.
We both fell silent, our gazes turned downward.
It was Emma who finally broke the silence. Since I was a child, I was always told I was cute or that I'd grow up to be beautiful. My appearance brought me attention and affection. And as a child, I enjoyed that. But as I got older, it started to feel suffocating. People would say,
You don't need to study since you're so pretty, or it must be nice to be beautiful.
They meant well, but I began to feel trapped by my looks. No matter what I did, it was always about my appearance. If I did something that didn't fit the image, I'd get criticized. People expected me to act a certain way because of how I looked. Over time, I found myself smiling like a doll, just to keep up with those expectations. I was stunned to hear her confessing something so deep and painful. I had always thought that being attractive was an advantage, regardless of gender, but I had never considered the burden it could carry. The Emma I knew had always been the center of attention, always smiling. It pained me to realize that some of those smiles were masks she wore to protect herself. Emma, don't look so sad.
I did have fun being around everyone, but there were times when I just wanted to shout, "Here I am."
And then I noticed you. Mike.
You didn't spend much time with the others, but there you were, quietly reading in the classroom, going to the library after school.
I envied you. What do you mean?
You seemed like someone who was doing what you wanted, living on your own terms.
I admired that. And before I knew it, I was always watching you.
Eventually, just watching wasn't enough, so I gathered the courage to talk to you.
I asked you to help me with my studies.
I thought you might say no, but deep down, I felt like you wouldn't refuse.
And when you agreed, I was so relieved.
She smiled mischievously, a hint of that playful charm I remembered. Being with you felt so comfortable. You were a great teacher, and I started to enjoy math because of you. But more than that, you never judged me.
Even when I laughed too loud, rambled on, pouted, or acted like a child, you never told me to stop because it didn't suit my looks. You just accepted me, smiling all the while.
That made me so happy. Those moments became something I cherished deeply. They were the only times I could be my true self.
Emma looked into my eyes as she continued. Her gaze slightly misty.
Her eyes held mine, and I couldn't look away.
You were my first love. You're someone I could never forget.
That's why I decided to come to this reunion when I found out you'd be here.
I wanted to see you, and this time, I wanted to give you a real answer to your confession, one that comes from the heart.
I could hardly breathe as I listened to her. Her intense gaze made my heart race, louder and louder in my chest.
The confession from that day.
Emma said she wanted to redo her response to my confession.
Emma.
I looked directly into her eyes as I called her name. For a moment, uncertainty flashed across her face. But I smiled, hoping to ease her nerves.
Emma, the confession I made that day, it was genuine.
But it was also fueled by the pressure and influence of David and the others,
making it less than ideal. So, if you don't mind, could I also redo that confession today?
I cleared my throat, turning to face her fully.
Emma, I've loved you for so long.
Even after more than 10 years, there hasn't been a single day when I didn't think about you. I love everything about you, your smile, your pout, everything.
Will you be with me, with the intention of getting married?
As soon as I finished speaking, tears welled up in Emma's eyes.
Yes. I've always loved you too, Mike. I love you so much.
She managed to say through her tears, which then began to flow freely. I gently patted her head, and she cried into my chest, her small body trembling with emotion. Thankfully, we were the only ones in the bar, and the bartender discreetly stepped away, leaving us in peace. I held Emma close, feeling the warmth of her presence, until she eventually cried herself out.
A few days after the reunion, I received a voicemail. It was from David. Can we meet? I've got something I want to talk about, the message said.
I thought it over for a moment before calling him back and agreeing to meet.
Thanks for coming, Mike. I know you're busy. It's fine. What did you want to talk about?
Given our history, I didn't feel much like making small talk, so I cut straight to the point. David's expression turned serious, and then, to my surprise, he bowed deeply. Startled by his sudden gesture, I took a step back.
Mike, I'm really sorry for everything I've done. After that night, everyone really let me have it.
They all knew your situation, why you had to transfer schools. I was the only one who didn't bother to find out, who just assumed I was better than you because of some superficial success. They told me I'm still just the same immature kid from back then, and they were right. I'm ashamed of how I treated you. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I know this apology is selfish, but I just wanted to say how truly sorry I am.
David must have done some serious reflecting after hearing from our classmates.
While his actions had been inexcusable, the sincerity in his apology was clear.
It's okay, David.
Mike. When David finally looked up, I noticed the dark circles clearly visible under his eyes. The confident, handsome David I remembered from high school, the one all the girls used to fawn over, seemed like a distant memory. A lot has happened, but let's move forward. Take care of yourself.
With that, I turned to leave, retracing my steps. Thanks for hearing me out, Mike.
Take care. I heard him say behind me, but I didn't respond, simply walking away.
Honestly, I'll never forget what David did. But I'm glad I listened to what he had to say. 6 months after our reunion, Emma and I got married.
Most of the guests were connected to her, but I also invited a few high school classmates. I didn't invite David, but through a mutual friend, I received a message from him saying, "Congratulations.
Wishing you happiness."
I also heard that David had left his prestigious job and moved out of his parents' house to work on a farm in the Tohoku region. Apparently, he wanted to rebuild himself and became interested in food as a foundation of health. In a recent photo I was shown, David was bearded, covered in dirt, and grinning in his work clothes.
That's a nice smile, Emma murmured.
Yeah. But it doesn't hold a candle to the smile we're sharing today,
I said as I lifted Emma in her wedding dress. Cheers erupted from all around us.
Hey, Mike, stop it. Emma blushed, clearly embarrassed by my actions, but her smile was filled with happiness. As I gently kissed her forehead, I made a firm vow in my heart, I would never let go of this smile again.
We don't always get to choose whether we're born into a fortunate situation or not.
And what constitutes fortunate varies from person to person.
But I believe that very few people can find lasting happiness by simply resting on the laurels of a fortunate environment.
To sustain happiness, we must continue to put in effort. It's through that effort that we find the true blessings and happiness life has to offer.
Kimberly. This is a disaster.
The materials that Sarah prepared have been tampered with, and if we leave it like this, the deal will fall through. Please do something. Stephen was seen rushing to the manager, Kimberly's desk, pleading with her. His face was pale, and he looked desperate. Kimberly, too, widened her eyes and opened her mouth as if to say, "This can't be true."
Ah, that's right.
Today was the day when the CEO of World Bay Corporation, Lewis, was visiting. The negotiation was supposed to be handled by Sarah, but it seems Stephen was also present as support. This deal is projected to bring in $100 million, the highest revenue our company has ever seen. If it falls through, it would be a catastrophe for the company.
What are you talking about? We checked the materials thoroughly yesterday, didn't we? There's no way they could have been tampered with.
Double check it. Kimberly tried to calm Stephen down as she said this. But Stephen, still frantic, insisted, "I've checked it multiple times, and the original materials are nowhere to be found.
All we have are the tampered ones. Go and get Sarah. Get her here now. Sarah is explaining the situation to Lewis and can't leave her seat." Kimberly sighed, "There's no choice then. I won't forgive you all later for making me handle this."
With that, Kimberly headed to the conference room with Stephen.
Left alone in the office, I began to worry that things had taken a serious turn. Just then, I was startled when Simon, the department head, called out to me from behind, saying, "What's going on?" "Simon. How long have you been here?" "I just arrived." "It looks like something serious is going on?"
As usual, Simon seemed unruffled as he spoke to me. Given the gravity of the situation, I explained. The CEO of World Bay Corporation, Lewis, is here for negotiations, but it seems the materials Sarah prepared have been tampered with. And the negotiation is stalling. Stephen called Kimberly for help, and now she's gone to the conference room. Before I could finish, Simon said,
"Kimberly can't handle this.
You should go help them, Kyle."
I was shocked. "Me? Are you serious?" "Yes, you can handle this, can't you?" I didn't know what gave Simon such confidence, but he wasn't wrong. I was sure I could get us out of this mess. Understood.
Without hesitation, I said this and knocked on the conference room door before entering. Inside, Kimberly was desperately trying to explain the situation to Lewis, Sarah looked on the verge of tears, and Stephen was helplessly panicking.
Oh no! What are you saying? With that explanation, we can't proceed with the deal. I'm going to have to call this off, Lewis declared. The situation was dire. Amidst the chaos, Kimberly noticed me and said something like this. Kyle, why are you coming in now? This is a critical moment. You'll mess everything up. Go and make another pot of coffee, quickly. Kimberly ordered me with a furious look.
Then, from behind me, Simon spoke up.
You're the one who should make the coffee, Kimberly. Leave the negotiation to Kyle. What? No.
I'm sorry, but Simon, Kyle is the most incompetent employee in our department. I can't agree with you on entrusting this crucial negotiation to him. Kimberly tried to calm herself as she said this. But Simon, in a rare stern tone, said, Kimberly, this isn't a suggestion.
It's an order. Comply immediately.
Kimberly couldn't argue with that, and though clearly dissatisfied, she glared at me as she stepped back.
I apologize for the disturbance. My name is Simon, the department head. I'm deeply sorry for showing you such an unprofessional scene.
Kyle here will take over as the lead on this negotiation. He is an excellent employee who graduated from Harvard. Simon quickly approached Lewis and handed over his business card.
Kimberly shouted, What? Stephen followed with a shocked, Huh? Indeed. Kyle, you do seem like a sharp guy. I think I can trust you to continue this conversation.
After exchanging business cards with Simon, Lewis extended his hand to me for a handshake. Kimberly and Stephen's astonished faces caught my eye. Well, ignoring them, I quickly approached Lewis, shook his hand, saying, Thank you, and took a seat next to Sarah.
My name is Kyle.
I'm 30 years old and in my 5th year as a working professional. I work for a major jewelry manufacturing company. Although it's my 5th year in the workforce, I've only been with this company for 2 months. I had some doubts about my previous company and was looking for a new job when, by chance, the current company's CEO, Mr. Kennedy, who happens to know my uncle, gave me a referral, and I joined through a mid-career hire.
Coincidentally, the Overseas Business Promotion Department was established at the same time I joined.
And a few members from the Domestic Sales Department were assigned to this new department, including myself. The department manager is Kimberly, a woman about 10 years older than me. There's also Sarah, a senior employee who's a year older than me and has been working at this company since she graduated. And then there's Stephen, who's technically my junior with 2 years of work experience. But he's been with the company longer since he joined right after college. These are the people I usually work with, but 2 of them have a knack for looking down on me, which makes things a bit troublesome.
Those 2 are Kimberly and Stephen. Sarah, the senior who's 1 year older, is a kind and considerate woman, well liked by employees in other departments.
And I was captivated by her charm on my first day at the company. Plus, she's beautiful. I can't imagine Sarah looking down on anyone, and it seems completely out of character for her, both in the past and likely in the future.
On the other hand, the other 2.
They lack even a fraction of Sarah's charm, so much so that I wish they could learn a thing or two from her.
First, there's Kimberly.
She's a genius at being intimidating and making snide remarks. I heard from employees in other departments that she was disliked by everyone in the sales department before she came to our team. On my first day, when I greeted her with a cheerful "nice to meet you," she just ignored me. I wondered if she might be hard of hearing, so I tried again, louder and closer, but she still ignored me, even when our eyes met. As I stood there, a bit confused, Stephen, who had been watching, whispered to me, "Don't worry about it.
Kimberly is like that with everyone.
That's why no one likes her." I see, there are people like that sometimes, so I didn't let it bother me too much, knowing there are all kinds of people in the world. However, what surprised me was that Stephen, who had given me this advice, also turned out to have a problematic personality. I was curious about the new employee coming in, but it turns out he's useless. I hate that they put someone incompetent in our department when we're already busy.
I asked Kimberly about Kyle's academic background. And she didn't know. He's definitely just a high school grad.
I'll use polite language since he's technically older, but I've been here longer. So I'm going to boss him around and make his life miserable. I overheard Steven saying this to a colleague in the break room shortly after I joined.
Well, whatever.
At least I have Sarah, my only source of comfort and motivation, with her smile.
Steven, you forgot to clean the coffee maker again. The morning after I joined, Kimberly's shrill voice echoed through the office. Sorry. But Kyle took over the coffee duties from yesterday, so it's not my fault.
Steven hurriedly made this excuse.
Getting scolded first thing in the morning. Kimberly seems to have mood swings. Poor guy.
I thought to myself as I was reading the company manual and loading necessary data onto my computer.
When I suddenly realized, wait. Did Steven just mention my name? I looked up. Kyle. You said you'd take over the task, but you're all talk, aren't you? Useless from day one. What was Mr. Kennedy thinking when he hired you mid-career? Kimberly shouted angrily.
It seems her anger had now turned towards me. But I had no recollection of Steven asking me to take over the coffee duties, nor had I offered to do so.
This was completely false. As I was about to argue back, Steven quickly said, Kimberly,
I'll go to the break room with Kyle and show him how to make coffee properly.
And before I knew it, he was dragging me off to the break room. Hey, why did you lie? I never agreed to take over the coffee duties. Come on, it's no big deal. We help each other out when needed, right? Steven replied, trying to brush it off.
I thought it was a bit sad that he had been Kimberly's underling and probably bullied before I came along.
Fine, whatever. I'll make the coffee every morning if it helps. Thanks, appreciate it. Steven said dismissively as he left me alone in the break room and hurried back to his desk.
I thought, seriously, but let it go. I didn't need any instructions on how to use the coffee maker, and finding the coffee grounds in the cupboard was easy enough.
So there was no issue.
Since Kimberly seemed to be waiting for today's coffee, I brewed it and brought it to everyone. Kimberly took her coffee with a sullen expression, without even a thank you, still as cold and distant as ever.
For a moment, I thought it might be amusing if she was just hiding her embarrassment. But even if that were the case, I doubt I'd ever find Kimberly likable. In contrast, Sarah's graceful demeanor and perfect thoughtfulness made all the unpleasantness fade away just by watching her. Thank you.
If you're ever busy or feeling overwhelmed, please let me know, and I'll be happy to take over.
Sarah said this when I handed her the coffee. Is she an angel? No, a goddess. I almost said it out loud but managed to hold back.
It was endearing that she spoke to me, her junior, with such polite language.
In fact, I wouldn't mind if Sarah were to say something mean to me.
I couldn't help but smile at my silly fantasy. But it turns out, I wasn't the only one who admired Sarah. And the person who did was closer than I expected.
It happened about a month after I joined the company. We received news of the largest potential client since the establishment of the Overseas Business Promotion Department. An overseas jewelry retailer called World Bay Corporation was considering placing a substantial order for our high-priced jewelry.
If successful, it would bring in about $100 million in sales. Until now, our company mainly dealt with domestic clients, but this deal was on a scale that was incomparable in both unit price and order quantity.
This is exactly the kind of success we were aiming for with the overseas business promotion.
Push forward and secure the contract. Simon, the department head, said with a smile as he spoke to Kimberly at her desk. It's just a lead that the domestic sales team handed over to us, so Kimberly didn't contribute at all. Steven muttered quietly, so Kimberly wouldn't hear. After Simon left, Kimberly looked around at the three of us and said,
This is a deal we absolutely cannot afford to lose. And of course, Sarah, you're the only one I can trust with this. I'm counting on you. Sarah responded in a soft voice, understood.
I'll send you the details by email later. The COO, Mr. Lewis, is coming to Japan soon, so prepare the materials for the negotiation by then.
I'm counting on you. Kimberly said that and then immediately headed out for lunch during the break. Is Kimberly really not going to do anything herself? Stephen grumbled as he walked over to Sarah and said, "Sarah, I'll help with anything you need. Let's work hard together." "Thank you. There are some things I can't handle on my own, so I'll rely on you when I need help." After Sarah replied so, she turned to me and said, "Kyle, I might need to ask you for help too when things get tough. I appreciate it in advance." "Of course. Anytime." Before I could say it, Stephen chimed in, No, Sarah. You shouldn't rely on Kyle. He's a useless high school grad with an unknown academic background. I graduated from K University, so I'm more reliable." "Don't say things like that, Stephen." "But it's the truth," Stephen said. Not wanting to engage in a pointless argument in front of Sarah, I chose to stay silent and said nothing more. From that point on, Stephen kept offering to help Sarah with everything, even suggesting, "If you're free tonight, how about we grab a drink? You can talk to me about anything." Stephen's simple-minded nature made his feelings for Sarah quite obvious. To be fair, you could say he was direct or just honest. Sarah always declined Stephen's invitations to drink, so I figured she probably had a boyfriend. Once, as a joke, I said, "I'll join you guys for a drink too, Stephen." But she immediately shut me down with, "Oh, that's a no-go." And so, the date of Lewis's visit was set for about a month later. Sarah gathered all the necessary materials, including specs of our jewelry, production timelines, and other relevant data, translating everything into English for the negotiation. Kimberly had told her, "Lewis is apparently fluent in Japanese, so you don't need to stress over the English." But Sarah responded, "Yes, but I think it's always better to communicate as much as possible in the client's native language for better results." At the same time, other international deals started coming in for the overseas business promotion department. Though they weren't as significant, Stephen and I were both assigned other tasks and stayed busy every day. Then, one day, after several hectic weeks had passed, I had been out of the office for meetings both that day and the previous day, spending my time outside the company. After successfully finishing the meeting and returning to the office, I heard Stephen frantically exclaiming, "Kimberly! This is terrible. The materials Sarah prepared have been tampered with, and if this continues, the deal will fall apart. Please, do something." I saw him pleading with Kimberly as he rushed to her desk. His face was pale, and he looked desperate. Kimberly also looked shocked, her eyes wide as if she wanted to say, "This can't be true." So today was the day Lewis, the CEO of our major client, World Bay Corporation, was visiting. The negotiation was supposed to be handled by Sarah, but it seems Stephen was also present as support. This deal was expected to bring in $100 million, the highest revenue in our company's history. If it falls through, it would be a disaster for the company. "What are you talking about? We thoroughly checked the materials yesterday, didn't we? There's no way they could have been tampered with. Double check it." Kimberly tried to calm Stephen down as she said this. But Stephen, still frantic, insisted, "I've checked it multiple times, and the original materials are nowhere to be found. All we have are the tampered ones. Go and get Sarah. Get her here now. Sarah is explaining the situation to Lewis and can't leave her seat." Kimberly sighed, "There's no choice then. I won't forgive you all later for making me handle this." With that, Kimberly headed to the conference room with Stephen. Left alone in the office, I began to worry that things had taken a serious turn. Just then, I was startled when Simon, the department head, called out to me from behind, saying, "What's going on?" "Simon, how long have you been here?" "I just arrived." "It looks like something serious is going on?" As usual, Simon seemed unruffled as he spoke to me. Given the gravity of the situation, I explained. "The CEO of World Bay Corporation is here for negotiations, but it seems the materials Sarah prepared have been tampered with, and the negotiation is stalling." Stephen called Kimberly for help, and now she's gone to the conference room. Before I could finish, Simon said, "Kimberly can't handle this. You should go help them, Kyle." I was shocked. "Me? Are you serious?" "Yes, you can handle this, can't you?" I didn't know what gave Simon such confidence, but he wasn't wrong. I was sure I could get us out of this mess. "Understood." Without hesitation, I said this and knocked on the conference room door before entering.
Inside, Kimberly was desperately trying to explain the situation to Lewis, Sarah looked on the verge of tears, and Stephen was helplessly panicking.
Oh no! What are you saying? With that explanation, we can't proceed with the deal. I'm going to have to call this off, Lewis declared. The situation was dire. Amidst the chaos, Kimberly noticed me and said this. Kyle, why are you coming in now? This is a critical moment. You'll mess everything up. Go and make another pot of coffee, quickly. Kimberly ordered me with a furious look.
Then, from behind me, Simon spoke up.
You're the one who should make the coffee, Kimberly. Leave the negotiation to Kyle. What? No.
I'm sorry, but Simon, Kyle is the most incompetent employee in our department. I can't agree with you on entrusting this crucial negotiation to him. Kimberly tried to calm herself as she said this. But Simon, in a rare stern tone, said, Kimberly, this isn't a suggestion.
It's an order. Comply immediately. Kimberly couldn't argue with that and, though clearly dissatisfied, she glared at me as she stepped back. I apologize for the disturbance. My name is Simon, the department head. I'm deeply sorry for showing you such an unprofessional scene. Kyle here will take over as the lead on this negotiation. He is an excellent employee who graduated from Harvard. Simon quickly approached Lewis and handed over his business card. Kimberly shouted, What? Stephen followed with a shocked, Huh? Indeed. Kyle, you do seem like a sharp guy. I think I can trust you to continue this conversation. After exchanging business cards with Simon, Lewis extended his hand to me for a handshake. I noticed the astonished faces of Kimberly and Stephen. Ignoring their reactions, I quickly approached Lewis, shook his hand, and said, Thank you, before taking a seat next to Sarah. Stephen shot me a look that seemed to say, What the heck is going on? Simon, with an unusually serious expression, whispered in my ear, Kyle, I know you understand the importance of this deal for our company. Now is the time to show us what you're capable of, and then he smiled. I replied, Understood, took a deep breath, and began speaking to Lewis in fluent English. Kimberly and Stephen stared at me, wide-eyed and open-mouthed. I explained to Lewis in English that there had been an unfortunate mistake with the materials and offered my sincere apologies. Speaking in his native language seemed to improve Lewis's mood. Then, I took the opportunity to whisper to Sarah. Please check if you can find the correct data that wasn't tampered with. I'll keep the conversation going in the meantime. Stephen has been searching, but he couldn't find it. Also, the shared folder where the deleted data should be isn't accessible. Sarah replied, almost in tears. You can access the executive-only folder from this company laptop. Try searching from here. I quickly said this and handed her my laptop. Sarah, though surprised, responded with a hesitant huh, but followed my instructions, understanding the urgency of the situation. Kyle. I found it. The correct materials I created are in the executive folder. A few moments later, I heard Sarah's excited voice. Great. Print them out quickly and let's hand them to Lewis. Yes. Sarah hurried off to the copier, looking relieved. Looks like we're solving the problem, Kyle. You're incredible. A truly excellent employee. With you here, I feel confident we can proceed smoothly. Lewis complimented me after observing my exchange with Sarah. Kimberly, while somewhat relieved, still had a complex expression on her face. After a while, Sarah returned with the correct materials. Lewis seemed satisfied with the updated negotiation documents that Sarah had meticulously prepared in English. In the end, Lewis agreed to finalize the deal successfully. After the negotiation concluded and we saw Lewis out, we all returned to our desks. But I could feel Kimberly and Stephen glancing at me with looks that suggested they had something to say. Kimberly was the first to speak up. Kyle. If you're fluent in English, you should have told us from the start. You made me look like a fool. What were you thinking? And what's this about Harvard? Simon was lying. What are we going to do if Lewis finds out later? Exactly, Kyle. Even if you bailed us out, it just made us look bad. Stephen jumped in, venting his frustration.
I had no intention of making you look bad. I just wanted to save the company from a crisis. And by the way, I really did graduate from Harvard.
I replied honestly.
Then Sarah immediately stood up, saying, if it weren't for Kyle, the $100 million deal would have fallen through.
I can't thank you enough.
I'm truly sorry for my mistake, everyone.
Sarah, it wasn't your fault. It was clearly someone's tampering.
You're the victim here, so you don't need to apologize.
I hurriedly reassured her.
Stephen chimed in, yes, exactly.
Sarah isn't at fault.
And Kyle, stop lying about your education.
Sarah was on the verge of tears.
Meanwhile, Kimberly was fuming, exclaiming, ugh.
This is too much. Just stop dragging me into all this. At that moment, I heard the door open with a click. Mr. Kennedy.
Standing there was President, Mr. Kennedy. I've heard about the trouble you all faced, but it seems you've managed to secure the contract.
I appreciate your efforts. Thank you,
Mr. Kennedy said, to which Kimberly quickly replied, not at all. I'll make sure nothing like this ever happens again.
Upon hearing this, Sarah immediately stood up and apologized. I'm deeply sorry. Sarah, it wasn't your fault. You don't need to apologize. I've already looked into the matter. It turns out an employee from another department in sales was responsible. We found out by checking the computer records. Unfortunately, that employee has been terminated.
Tampering with crucial negotiation materials is a serious offense, and it's a criminal act.
So don't worry, Sarah. You did nothing wrong.
Upon hearing that from Mr. Kennedy, Sarah said, thank you so much.
Mr. Kennedy continued.
We'll be reviewing our security protocols, and tomorrow we'll revise the data management rules and share them company-wide. Once the notice comes out, please make sure to go through it.
And, Kyle.
Yes. I responded hastily, caught off guard by the sudden mention of my name.
You really saved us this time.
I've heard from Simon that you're not only excellent at crisis management but also have outstanding English communication skills. I knew your uncle when he introduced you to join our company, but now I realize just how fortunate we are to have such an exceptional employee.
We've just established the Overseas Business Promotion Department, and I expect we'll be relying on your abilities moving forward. Naturally, your position and compensation will be adjusted accordingly. So,
anyone who hinders your work will be considered as obstructing the company's business, and they will face appropriate consequences. Mr. Kennedy said this while staring directly at Kimberly and then glancing at Stephen.
Mr. Kennedy? May I ask, is it really true that Kyle graduated from Harvard? In response to Kimberly's question, Mr. Kennedy looked over at me. Mr. Kennedy, since I'm no longer keeping it a secret, it's fine to confirm it.
With a smile, Mr. Kennedy replied, yes, it's true, Kimberly. Later that evening, Kimberly and Stephen, seemingly more exhausted than usual, left the office promptly at closing time. As I was tidying up to leave, Simon patted me on the shoulder and said, good job today. How about grabbing a drink? It was a rare invitation, so I was delighted and quickly responded, I'd love to.
Sarah was still in the office as well. Sarah, why don't you join us?
Simon invited Sarah, and the three of us decided to go out together. We left the office, took a backstreet, and entered a stylish little restaurant that Simon frequented. Among my supervisors, I had a particularly high regard for Simon. He's about 10 years older than me, a gentleman with a soft demeanor.
He's mild-mannered and well-liked by everyone.
But when it matters, he doesn't hesitate to take charge, and he's very capable at his job.
I was also thrilled at the prospect of having dinner with Sarah after work for the first time.
Though she had mentioned being a light drinker, she blushed as she sipped her first beer, looking utterly adorable. It felt a bit disrespectful to describe a senior colleague as cute, but that's exactly what she was. Today, the company was saved, thanks to both of you. I wanted to express my gratitude, which is why I invited you out tonight.
Simon began, bringing up the day's events.
Any work-related data is designed to be temporarily stored in a separate folder if deleted. Only a limited number of executives can access that folder, but I had already trusted Kyle enough to grant him access, just in case. That decision paid off today. I heard from Mr. Kennedy that the person responsible for tampering with the materials has been identified. I mentioned, to which Simon nodded and said, "That's right." I thought it was important to inform Sarah as well. The culprit is Emma from the domestic business department. When Simon mentioned the name, Sarah let out a small "oh." "I had my suspicions," she said softly. As it turned out, the issue stemmed from a complicated personal relationship involving Sarah, Emma, and another male employee.
Really? Given Sarah's popularity within the company, it wasn't surprising there might be some romantic entanglements, though I was a bit disappointed.
But as I listened further, I was relieved to learn that Sarah hadn't actually been involved with anyone. Apparently, Emma, the employee in question, had fallen for Henry, a male colleague in the same department.
However, Henry was infatuated with Sarah.
Emma, feeling rejected, had lashed out by tampering with the materials in an act of revenge.
Sarah had even experienced harassment from Emma before. So, Sarah was completely innocent and just caught up in someone else's mess.
I blurted out in frustration. I had always thought that being beautiful was an advantage, but now I realized it could also bring a lot of trouble, and I felt sorry for her.
Even so. Sarah, you're such a wonderful person. I imagine you already have someone special in your life, right? I tried to ask casually.
Well, it wasn't casual at all, and Simon chuckled at my obviousness.
But to my surprise, Sarah immediately responded, "No. I'm not seeing anyone." I couldn't help but exclaim, "Really?" Simon burst into laughter at my reaction.
"But having a Harvard graduate join our company, that's something,"
Simon suddenly remarked.
"Speaking of which, I was curious about that earlier today as well."
"Did you know, Simon?" "I thought only Mr. Kennedy was aware," I asked Simon.
"When I joined the company, I had, of course, disclosed my educational and work background to Mr. Kennedy.
I had specifically asked Mr. Kennedy not to disclose my academic background within the company."
"Yes, Mr. Kennedy told me that you preferred not to reveal your academic background, but since I'm in a managerial position and someone he trusts, he decided to let me know discreetly. He also mentioned that it would be best not to share it with Kimberly,"
Simon explained. "Why did you want to keep your impressive academic background a secret?" Sarah asked curiously.
"Well, after I graduated from university, I worked at a Japanese company where I didn't hide my education.
However,
my colleagues would often belittle others by comparing them to me, saying things like, 'Kyle graduated from Harvard. But you only went to a low-ranked university, so of course, you're not as capable.' This caused one of my colleagues to quit. And I started to feel that the focus on my education was creating unnecessary biases. I realized that being labeled as the Harvard grad was causing more harm than good, so I decided to leave that company.
When I was offered the position here, I asked Mr. Kennedy to keep my educational background confidential.
And because of that, Kimberly and Stephen thought you were just a high school graduate and clearly looked down on you," Simon said with a wry smile. "Yes, compared to my previous company, it was interesting to see how differently people treated me based on their assumptions about my education."
Instead of feeling frustrated, I actually found it amusing. I replied with a laugh. "But you know, Sarah was different.
About a month after you joined, I asked her what she thought of the new guy, Kyle.
And she said." Simon trailed off with a grin. "Stop it, Simon. That's embarrassing,"
Sarah protested, her face turning bright red.
"Come on, now that we're here, it's fine."
Sarah said with a big smile that Kyle is a kind, considerate, and truly wonderful man.
So I said, "Sarah, I was asking about him as a colleague, not as a man," and when she turned red, I asked, "Do you like him?" Simon continued. "Wait, what happened next?" When he asked, "Do you like him?" I was dying to know how Sarah responded.
But Simon stopped the story right there. Before I could ask for the rest of the story, I realized that it was up to me to express my feelings to Sarah.
Understanding Simon's unspoken message. 2 months later.
My work in the overseas business promotion department had been recognized, so I was promoted to manager. Kimberly, who had been notorious among the staff for doing little work and being overly bossy, was demoted from her managerial role and reassigned to product management as a regular employee. Stephen, who had toned down his arrogant attitude since I became manager, continued to work in the same department under my supervision. However, he wasn't exactly friendly towards me. In a way, I understand it's inevitable. Not only did my quick promotion to manager bother Stephen, but there was also another reason that absolutely irritated him. "Kyle, what should we have for dinner tonight?" On our way home from work, while waiting on the train platform, Sarah clung to my arm and leaned in close as she asked,
"Sarah, we might run into someone from the company here, so maybe we shouldn't be holding hands."
I suggested, somewhat concerned.
"Why not? We're not doing anything wrong."
"Besides, everyone at the office already knows we're dating," she replied cheerfully.
"But
I'm a bit worried about how the guys who liked you might react." I made a somewhat joking but hesitant remark. Sarah clenched her fist with determination and said, "If anyone tries to mess with you, I'll protect you with everything I've got." Her fierce determination was so endearing that I released her arm, only to take her hand in mine, and together we boarded the train. Sarah and I had started dating and quickly decided to move in together. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for having found a partner I could truly trust. I wanted to cherish the people who believed in me for who I was, not for my titles.
I would work hard and make her happy.
As I looked at an ad for a wedding venue inside the train, I mentally pumped myself up with a firm "alright."
"What do you mean by alright?"
Sarah asked me. I replied, "Oh,
I just made a little resolution." To which Sarah responded, "Then should we have something energizing for dinner?" Feeling even happier, I laughed and said, "Let's do that."